Hey everyone, welcome back to WonderGod. Today we will see second part of what if Harry Potter left Hogwarts and rejected Dumbledore's plans. Here is short summary. After discovering Dumbledore's manipulation, Harry leaves Hogwarts with Hermione for America. There, they find new allies, and Harry trains for the inevitable battle with Voldemort, on his own terms. But before we begin, if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to subscribe to WonderGod and share it with your friends, because it really helps the channel grow. Now, let's begin the story. A big decision. Miriam's funeral was a quiet affair, and she was buried with Harry's parents and the Grangers at Godric's Hollow. Susan had held on to Harry and/or Hannah all through the service while Harry only paid brief attention to what was going on. In the morning, he was going to visit the ministry to find out the results of the examinations that had been done on Ginny. In the meanwhile, he was going over all of the money that he had in his vaults, and Harry tried to come up with different ways to spend some of it. 4 million of it was put aside to pay for the funerals of those people whose entire families had died. The Aurors had nearly dropped to the ground after Harry attended all 87,603 funerals. And when asked why he insisted on going to the funerals of some of the Death Eaters, he had replied with, "Almost nobody deserves to be buried alone," and this caused more than a few eyebrows to be raised in wizarding circles. "Decided on anything yet?" asked Parvati as she flopped into a chair and turned the TV on. The screen was blank for a moment, and then settled on a program about the newest film about the Titanic. "I have now," said Harry with a small smile. "Oh. What is?" Parvati looked from Harry, to the TV and then back again. "You cannot be serious," she exclaimed. "You want to raise the Titanic?" And the girl wondered if she should call for specialist mind healers. "I am, and I've got enough to do it," Harry said. "And it doesn't matter anyway. All I have to do is brew some luck potion, and I'm away with the fairies," and Harry smiled warmly as he outlined his plan. To her credit, Parvati listened to everything before speaking. "I think you'll need more than one reparo," she remarked. Harry woke early the next morning and showered, dressed, and then went down to breakfast, which was being cooked by the Potter twins. Only they and Susan remained at Allcroft House as the others had gone to spend the rest of the holidays with their families, as was only right. "Morning," he said, and he sat down to a delicious breakfast of bacon, eggs, Cumberland sausage, mushrooms, beans, fried tomatoes, fried bread, and lots of it. "Hi," greeted the twins. "Susan said she'll be down later," Parvati said. "Right," Harry said between mouthfuls. "I want to leave before she comes down," he added. "Oh, why's that?" asked Parvati. "You two both know what is going on today," said Harry. "Apart from the whole clusterf with Ginny, I'm also facing the prospect of seeing Dumbledore and Lupin being tried," and Harry rubbed his hands together. "Aren't I a lucky guy?" And the twins looked at each other. "You want one of us to come with you," Padma said. "I'm going to be there all day, you know," Harry said, finishing his breakfast and pushing the plate away. "I don't want to push into your time," and the girls giggled at Harry's thinking. "I'll come with you," said Padma. "Parvati can do the whole looking after Susan thing if she doesn't mind," and her sister Mock glared at her. "You're lucky I don't mind," she said. Harry thanked them both and went to the study for all of the documents he needed. Padma was waiting for him by the fireplace in the sitting room, dressed in a very smart-looking set of robes. "Ready to go?" Harry asked. "All set," the girl said. 2 flares of green fire later and both of them had arrived at the ministry. "Good morning, Mr. Potter," said Jackson as Harry and Padma came into his office. "I must be invisible," Padma said to Harry. "At least there is one gentleman in the room," she added. Jackson knew his error and tried to correct it. "I'm sorry, miss," he didn't actually know Padma at all. All he knew was that she had been at the final battle and had been aboard Hogwarts before its final plunge into Riddle Manor. "The name's Pottle, Padma Pottle," Padma paraphrased James Bond. "Well, it is nice to meet you properly," said Jackson. "Now I assume that Mr. Potter has told you what is going to happen today," he said. "Harry told me most of what would happen," Padma said. "Well, the first thing on the agenda is to read the report on Miss Weasley," Jackson began. "Then this afternoon we'll have the joint trials of Dumbledore and Lupin," and Harry thought about something. "How good a case do you have?" he asked. "Well, with the ministry in the state it is in, we've not been able to do much. But what we've found is that the records department was completely intact, so we've gone through all of the files where Dumbledore was either the presiding judge or some other participant, Jackson told him. What about Lupin? Asked Padma. She couldn't believe that somebody as seemingly good as Lupin had be the person to kill Hermione. From our questioning we've discovered that Lupin did it on Dumbledore's orders. It seems that they wanted you to feel that your wife's death was your fault, and that you'd come to them and do what they wanted you to do. That would include marrying Miss Weasley and then fathering a child, Jackson added. Do you have any of the files here? Asked Harry. I do, as it happens. Jackson pointed to the several thick folders on his desk. Can we have a look at them? Asked Padma, but Jackson shook his head. I couldn't allow that, I'm afraid, he said. But I need to use the toilet, and he got up and left the office and went the opposite way to the toilets. Harry and Padma took the hint and they copied the files quickly and then shrunk them to read later. After 10 minutes Jackson came back in. Long time, Harry said, poker-faced. Yes, Jackson replied. I see you didn't move the files, he added. We never touched them, Padma said. She was just the right side of not laughing at what had just happened. You better go to the courtroom now, said the Auror. Miss Weasley is due there any minute, and the pair left the office with Sharp following close behind them. I don't need anyone to act as my bodyguard, Harry told him. I know, Sharp replied. So get out of here, Harry said firmly. I'm not the minister anymore, so I don't rate an escort, he added. We all owe you a great deal, Mr. Potter, the Auror said, pushing a giant set of doors open with a flick of his wand. I know you are not the minister, but this is one of the things we can do to help you, and they passed through the doors and continued to a single lift. This was a lift used only by the minister when he or she wanted to get to a floor quickly. Harry and Padma rolled their eyes at the treatment they received but went inside anyway. Sharp pressed the button for the bottom floor, and in very little time they had arrived near courtroom 10. Two Aurors that Harry vaguely remembered from the battle at Hogwarts stiffened as the small group passed. As the ornate doors to the courtroom opened, Harry and Padma could hear the talking of both the members of the press and members of the public. Bet you wished for a quiet session, Padma whispered to Harry, who simply nodded. Attention on deck, Sharp said loudly, and the talking evaporated and everyone looked at Harry and Padma, though it was more at Harry than the latter. Lord Gryffindor arriving, and the Aurors who had been stationed inside on security detail became ramrod straight and brought their hands up into a smart salute. Harry went briefly red in the face before snapping a salute off back to them. As you were, he said with a nod. Sharp led Harry and Padma to a small box which gave a good view of the courtroom. With the muttering of a password, the box shimmered for a moment before cloaking itself and turning invisible. Harry watched as Padma looked around the private box, and smiled faintly as she opened a small locker. Ooh, she said delightedly, crisps, popcorn and cola, and Padma assumed that somebody had stocked it for them. They didn't have to wait long until they brought Ginny into the courtroom. She was wearing a bright orange set of robes, had chains on her legs and was in handcuffs. A small box attached to her left ankle made Harry suspect she had a magical suppressor on as well. Clearly Marchbanks was taking no chances at all with Ginny. At the same time what was left of the Wizardgamut filed in and took their seats. Marchbanks took the place of the chief witch. This court is now in session, she banged the gavel. This is the case of Harry Potter versus Minerva Molly Weasley. The prisoner has been examined by 3 independent healers and deemed fit to stand trial, and Marchbanks banged the gavel again. I demand you let me go, Ginny said defiantly. Professor Dumbledore promised me immunity for anything I did, and Marchbanks glared at her. Mr. Dumbledore no longer presides over this court, she told the younger witch. Whatever deal he offered you no longer exists, and the minister looked at her paperwork before glancing back at the youngest Weasley. Minerva Molly Weasley, you are accused of the following charges: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, aiding and abetting, theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, deception with intent, attacking the Lord Gryffindor, conspiracy to attack the Lord Gryffindor, attacking the Lady Gryffindor. 2. B. Conspiracy to attack the Lady Gryffindor. 2. B. Conspiracy to attack the head of a most ancient and noble house, bribery, corruption, cowardice in the face of the enemy, conspiracy to use unforgivables, putting Harry Potter into a really bad mood. That one got a good laugh from the watching press and public, attempted hostage taking, conspiracy to take a hostage, littering, falsifying official documentation, attempting to break up a family, verting the course of justice, conspiracy to vert the course of justice and deception. Marchbanks took a few moments to regain her composure and regain her breath, then she looked at Ginny. "How do you plead?" she inquired. "Not guilty," came the reply. "So noted," Marchbanks said. "Does anybody wish to stand as defense?" And only one person nodded. "I'll do it," and a tall red-haired figure rose from the bench and went to where Ginny still stood. "I'll defend my sister," said Percy. "Very well," Marchbanks said. "Remove the prisoner's leg restraints and handcuffs," she ordered, and an oar came forward to do the job. Ginny rubbed her sore wrists, which felt slightly hot as the cool air hit them. She and Percy sat down behind a desk which contained copies of the evidence. Ginny had already seen it the day before the trial, so she went over it with Percy while Marchbanks spoke to the court about a minor procedural issue. When she was done, Marchbanks nodded to Jackson, who Harry had failed to see slip inside the courtroom. He moved to the table for prosecution and began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, the case here today is a simple enough one. Miss Weasley has attempted to do almost unthinkable things to Harry Potter. She followed Dumbledore's orders in trying to poison him. My fellow Aurors have had large supplies of love potion found at Miss Weasley's home examined by healers, and they discovered that the vials contained enough strength to fatally poison Mr. Potter after no more than 4 or 5 doses. Jackson looked at Ginny for a moment before switching back to the Wizengamot. "Professor Dumbledore, who will be tried later today, asked Miss Weasley to carry Mr. Potter's child so that when he was murdered by them or another person, they could get their hands on the Potter fortune. At 9.30 this morning that stood at 900 billion plus, and Percy stood up. Objection, he called. My sister was duped and mind-controlled via spell work to follow Dumbledore's orders. She cares for Harry a great deal and would never have harmed him if she could have helped it. This evidence could have been faked to convict Ginny, and there was a moment or 3 of muttering. The evidence was kept under guard by goblins at Gringotts, said Marchbanks. This court thanks them for their assistance in this case, but Percy wasn't having any of it. I insist that it is faked, he said firmly, and Ginny nodded in agreement with her brother. If it is faked, said a voice, then I'm your mother. And if I was your mother, then I'd have thrown you off the top of Mount Everest, Griphook added, and he smiled, showing his newly sharpened and pointed teeth. Percy decided to not speak about that anymore. Objection overruled, said Marchbanks, and Percy sat down. I do not cast a slur about this court, but the Weasley family have always been greedy about money. They would stop at nothing to get their hands on it, so murder and what amounts to beep is no big deal to them, Jackson continued. I submit to the court that when Albus Dumbledore put forth the idea and plan to gain control of the Potter vaults, Miss Weasley agreed to use her body to carry Mr. Potter's child. Then when the child was born, he would meet with an unfortunate accident with a broom, and Harry looked at Padma. So that is how they planned it then, he whispered to her. Looks like it, she agreed. I was rather hoping for the old story of having say, and then, just after I came, being killed, Harry shrugged. Jackson and Percy argued the case backwards and forwards, and then after a good 3 hours of talking, Percy rose from his seat. I believe that the accused has the right to face her accuser, he said. You are correct, Marchbanks nodded. Then I suggest that my sister be released into my care until Mr. Potter can be asked to attend, Percy said smugly. No need, said a voice, and Harry appeared as if by apparating into the room. I'm here, Mr. Weasley, and I've heard everything that went on. Harry went over to the witness box and made to stand in it. And I wouldn't think about cursing me either. Padma. And Padma appeared in the same place that Harry had appeared in. She had her wand out but by her side. The watching press and members of the public snickered and sniggered as they knew that Harry and Padma had been listening and watching everything that was going on. It was rather fun to see 2 redheads do an impression of Goldfish. An Auror came up to Harry and told him to raise his hand. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth? She asked. I promise to tell the truth so far as much as I know it to be truthfully the truth, Harry said. A simple yes would have sufficed, Marchbanks said. I didn't want there to be a mistake, Harry replied. Percy stood up and began to question Harry closely with many personal questions. Do you like purebloods, Mr. Potter? He said. Yes, Harry replied. What about young pureblood? Witches? Percy pushed. Harry knew what he was doing, and he certainly wasn't going to sing to that hymn sheet. Some, repeated Percy. So there are some that you don't like then. And Harry grinned. I'm only 16, he said cheerfully, I haven't had chance to know them all in that way yet, and the entire viewing gallery burst into laughter, and Marchbanks had to use several deep booms from her wand to restore order. Please restrict yourself to answering the question, she said to Harry. I do apologize, Harry bowed to Marchbanks. I just assumed Mr. Weasley was asking about the number of UAL partners I had, and Marchbanks only just stopped from laughing herself. I must protest, Minister, Percy said. Mr. Potter is making a mockery of this court, he added. Can we get on with this trial please? Whined Ginny. I want to get out of these ugly robes, she added. I would keep quiet, young lady. Things do not look too good for you at the moment, said a member of the Wizengamot. Ginny looked furious but became silent as she was told to do. Percy questioned Harry for a full hour, Jackson asked nothing at all, and Harry walked out of the witness box. Perhaps you can find a better wife, Mr. Potter, Percy said, and there was a gasp from almost everyone in the room. Harry paused in mid-stride and swung his leg to the side so he turned back to face the elder of the two Weasleys. What did you say? Harry hissed. I only remarked that you might find a better wife than the one you had for only a matter of hours, Percy said. I am sure that Ginny here would take you back if you dropped all the charges, and Ginny put on her best expression of love and lust. Harry's hand went slowly down to his wand, withdrawing it so that everyone could see what was going on. Harry brought it to bear on Percy. You, sir, have insulted the memory of Hermione Jane Potter, my wife. I assume that you will not apologize. Harry asked. I will not, Percy said. Then I have no choice but to ask for satisfaction, Harry said. Percy became slightly pale for a while as he realized what he had said. It was deservedly given, he thought, but he never expected Harry to call him out. A duel. Marchbanks was wide-eyed. I will not allow it, she added. With respect, Minister, this is nothing to do with you. This is between myself and Percy, Harry told her. I accept your challenge, said Percy boldly, and then he thought of how to get the magical suppressor removed from Ginny. I will need my second to be freed, he added. An Auror will act as your second, Marchbanks said. One of the other members of the Wizengamot had whispered that duels had to be allowed to take place. Percy was angry about the failure, but he nodded in acceptance and an Auror came over and took position behind and to the left of him. Padma, Harry began. Goes without saying, she cut him off. You do know that this is one of the only times you can use an unforgivable. Harry said to Percy. I looked it up yesterday. A duel under these circumstances also allows me to cast the killing curse, and this was all confirmed. Marchbanks ordered the floor to be cleared, and the viewing people placed behind screens which would absorb spells cast. What are you going to do to him? Asked Padma to Harry. I'm just going to hurt him a bit, he replied. Nothing too bad you know, but something that will fulfill honor, and they saw that Percy was ready to begin. I thank you for your assistance, Harry bowed to Padma formally. It is my pleasure, she replied with an incline of her head. Percy and Harry squared each other up before Marchbanks created a deep booming noise. Begin, she said loudly. Impedimenta, Percy cast. Serpensortia, Harry shot back. Percy dodged the flying snakes and banished them back to Harry. They vanished with one wave and he sent back a bludgeoning jinx which grazed Percy's left arm. Crucio, despite the fact that unforgivables were allowed, everyone gasped at the actual casting. Harry felt he was like on fire, all his nerves burned and it was like one had been hit by an electric shock. Percy kept the spell going for a full minute before releasing Harry from the effects. He dropped to the floor panting heavily. Care to give up? Percy taunted him. Never, Harry forced out. He got to his feet and hit his opponent with a bright yellow spell which slammed Percy into a very thick stone pillar. Waving off all help, Harry made careful movements over to where the elder Weasley lay in a heap. As he watched half-dazed, Percy saw his wand being kicked away and stamped on by Harry's right foot. Wah, he couldn't finish the sentence. All of a sudden everyone saw him rise into the air and shake around like a rag doll before slamming repeatedly into the pillar many times. When he was satisfied, Harry let him fall to the stone floor and he advanced with his wand drawn. I could kill you no, Percy, he said and pressed his wand tip into the older man's temple. I could cast the killing curse, but I never would do that. Not even for a low-life piece of Death Eater scum like you, and Harry kicked him powerfully in the ribs which could be heard to shatter and break. Death Eater, Jackson said. He didn't get what Harry had meant. Percy Weasley is a Death Eater, Padma cottoned on quickly, and she ripped the arms off Percy's robes. His right arm showed the dark mark clearly enough. Nearly everyone backed away as if he was diseased, and the Aurors pounced on him and dragged him off to the cells. Ginny broke down into tears as she saw her last chance of escape being dragged away. Padma looked at her with very little pity and then gazed at a heavily battered Harry. "You all right?" she asked. "I've had enough," Harry said. "I've had enough." He yelled louder. "The wizarding world has always had it in for me, so that is it. I am leaving the magical world until such time as I deem you are sorry for all the lies, slander and hurt you have caused me, my wife and my friends," and he motioned to Padma to hold onto his arm tightly. "I have one last thing to say," he said this to Marchbanks. "What is that?" she said quietly. "Get some better wards set up," and he apparated with Padma on his arm. "Shit," everyone said at once. Nearly everyone was guilty of what Harry had accused them of, and now their only hope of salvation from evil had decided to leave the wizarding world and might never come back again. They held the portkeys in their hands, thought about what they would be doing and reached a decision. They got up from wherever they had heard the broadcast of the trial on the WWN, went to their bedrooms and packed their trunks with everything they owned. Gripping the portkeys tightly, each said a particular two-word code key. Rogue Squadron. The press went mad over Harry's announcement to leave the magical world, and this caused problems for Marchbanks. While it might have been possible to cover this up, the trial, or lack of, had been broadcast on the WWN on the insistence of Marchbanks, who wanted an openness that had not been seen in the previous two administrations. Most of the magical community had been listening to the broadcast, and all feared that Harry might not save them from another Dark Lord. Kingsley Shacklebolt had led a small number of people in arguing that Harry should be arrested by the Ministry, locked away in a secure location and forced to fight for the light side in future conflicts. Jackson and Sharp had led a force of 20 Aurors to arrest him, and they very happily silenced him, put him into a trunk and took him to the maximum security cells at the Ministry. "You know this is turning into quite a good show," said Padma as she folded the paper. "I would have thought that after the first week they would have got the hint I didn't want to be found," Harry said. He was glad that no one at the Ministry had been able to find Allcroft House in the many records kept in whatever department they might be in. It was a month after the dramatic vanishing act that Harry had performed along with Padma, and still the press looked for him. "Will you ever come back?" asked Padma quietly. Harry didn't answer for so long that Padma assumed he would never do so. But as she was heading to the library, Harry started to speak. "Perhaps," he said, "perhaps I will one day. But I just want to be myself. Not the boy who lived, but simply as Harry Potter. Maybe I need a few weeks or a few months away, that's all," and Harry turned and smiled at the former Ravenclaw student who felt some of the old Harry had returned. As she headed for the library, Padma knew that he would be his normal self again. "You want to do what?" asked the man. "I am being perfectly serious," said Harry in reply. "She'd break apart before you got more than 30 feet above the ocean floor. Then nobody would ever be able to see her again except as rusty scrap metal." The man Harry was meeting with was astounded about his proposal. "I assure you that the work could be done in under 2 weeks, Parvati said. "And what do you plan to do with her after you get her up?" asked the man. While he wanted to keep ownership of the vessel, he did have a £2 billion offer to sell the Titanic to Harry. "Mr. Potter's plan is to complete its maiden voyage, Mr. Lovett," Hannah said to him. Lovett scoffed as he couldn't quite believe the absurdness of the whole situation. "I suppose you'll tell me it is all going to be done with magic," he said. "More or less," said Harry seriously. Lovett would never know how accurate he was with that statement. "How do you plan to join the two halves together?" Lovett had already decided to take the offer, but he wanted to see what was going to happen first. "I intend to weld it underwater using wet steel," said Harry. He looked for a long while at Lovett's face, and the other man was forced to look away as he saw the blazing passion of Harry's eyes. "All right, Mr. Potter," Lovett said. "If that is what you want, then the RMS Titanic belongs to you now," and he signed the papers. Harry and the group all took time to enjoy the summer on the island of Sodor, and Harry found it refreshing to not have to worry about any dark lords that might come a-calling. As Harry, Susan, Hannah and Dean watched the trains going by in the distance from an upstairs bedroom, Parvati and Padma were going over a lot of old documents and looking for information on the Titanic's design plans. It was amazing what you can get from an Irish shipyard if you kept a few people supplied with Guinness every so often. Things might have taken a bit longer, but Harry unleashed Seamus upon the population and he got the results he wanted. "So how do you plan to get her up?" asked Lavender. She was wrapping a present for her mother's birthday. Being away from their families had placed a massive strain on the group, but they had insisted that it wasn't so bad really. They did miss spending time with their families so soon after a major and traumatizing event, but they had all come to Harry's side. Harry had insisted they didn't have to be around him all the time. Hannah had said that Hermione would never have wanted him to be alone. So far the group had missed 2 birthdays and 3 weddings, but nobody had made much fuss about this really. "Well, I was going to make a batch of luck potion, swim down to the wreck site and then cast a reparo on it," Harry said in reply to Lavender's question. "So when do we go out there?" asked Susan. "I'm waiting for the twins." Harry sipped his cool pumpkin juice. "They've been doing some work for me. I would have done it myself, only I was told that they would hex me." And they laughed. A few minutes later, and the Potter twins came into the room and looked at Harry. "We've done it," said Parvati. "Really?" Harry became excited and put down his pumpkin juice. "There are only 4 people left alive," Parvati said. 3 of them are passengers and 1 is a member of the crew," and she handed Harry a folder which he opened and read the contents. He studied them 3 times to be certain about the contents and then smiled. "I've got to really get around to actually paying you," Harry smiled. Now that the information had been found, Harry had a man to telephone, talk to and arrange to see in a very short space of time. He led the way into the master bedroom where he picked up the phone and put it onto the hands-free speaker so the others could hear. Harry dialed the number on one of the sheets of paper in the folder and waited for an answer. "Hello," came the sound of an old man. "Good afternoon, sir," Harry said. "Can I speak to a Mr. John L. Bigelow please?" he asked. "You are speaking to he," said the voice. "Sir, my name is Harry Potter. I understand that you are the last surviving member of the crew. I would like to come and speak to you about a project I am heading up about the ship," and they could hear Bigelow growl. "Now look here, young man," he said, "I've said before that I do not wish to take part in these television programs. Now if you excuse me, I have other things to do with my time than to sit and listen to people treat me like a foolish old man," and Harry panicked slightly. "Sir," he said quickly, "I assure that I don't work for the TV companies. I'm talking to you as a fellow sailor, though I only sail a yacht," and there was a pause. "Sir," Harry called. "I'm listening," said Bigelow. His voice held a faint trace of curiosity in his tone of speech. "I would like to visit you at home because of something that might interest you," Harry replied. "You want to write a book about me?" Bigelow asked. "No, sir," Harry told him, "I've brought the wreck of the Titanic, and I would like to know if you would be interested in it being raised from the ocean floor," and there was a silence which lasted longer than the first. "You want to raise her?" Bigelow asked quietly. "My old ship. I think you making a fool out of me, Mr. Potter," the man said. "Can I at least meet you, sir?" Harry requested. Sailor to sailor so to speak, and Bigelow relented. "I suppose all I would waste is time looking at the world going by," he said, but the group could hear the curiosity back in his voice once more. "If you can visit me tomorrow at my home, then you have an interview, Mr. Potter," and they talked for a little while longer before Bigelow hung up. "I think that went well," said Hannah. "I agree," Lavender smiled warmly. "I mean, did you hear him when you mentioned your raising of his old ship?" she asked, and Harry nodded. "I better book us some train tickets," he said, and he picked up the phone to make a reservation. Bigelow looked around his home by the sea and sighed. Even if it was a waste of time, at least he would be wasting it with a fellow sailor. Maybe agreeing wasn't such a bad idea after all. Harry and the others stood outside the large cottage, and took in the surrounding garden. Rose bushes grew neatly, the grass was trimmed and it looked very nice indeed. Dean knocked on the door to the cottage and then stood aside as the door opened after a few moments' delay. It revealed a man who was not as old as they had been expecting. and as they looked at each other Harry could see the rugged features of a man with years of experience at sea. "Mr. Bigelow," Harry said, "my name is Harry Potter. These are my friends and associates," and Bigelow shook hands with Harry, Dean and Seamus whilst he kissed the hands of the four girls. "I suppose you'd all like a drink," the elderly man said. "Please," said Parvati. Bigelow nodded and busied himself with giving them all a scotch before they all sat outside in the even bigger garden in the back. This had a commanding view of the harbor below and they could all see the fishing boats bobbing up and down in the slight swell of the water. Several tugs and other large vessels lined one of the harbor walls. "So, what can an old man such as myself do to help you?" asked Bigelow. "As I said yesterday, sir, my plan is to raise the Titanic. It should be easy to do as I have access to some pretty good lifting gear of sorts," Harry said. "I would hope so after sitting 12,000 feet under the ocean," Bigelow said with a chuckle. They talked about his garden for a while before Susan took another sip of her drink before speaking to the old sailor. "Could you tell us about some of your time on the Titanic?" she asked. "Why certainly, my dear," Bigelow said. "It's been 84 years, and I can still smell the fresh paint. The china had never been used. The sheets had never been slept in. Titanic was called the ship of dreams, and it really was. It's an odd thing, you know. I've had a few ships shot out from under me. More than my share. 3 in the 1914-18 fracas, and 2 in 39 to 45. But all anybody ever asks me about is the Titanic," and Padma laughed musically. "And now we're doing the same thing," she said. "And lucky you came to the right man," Bigelow said with a smile. "I remember her like it was only the day before. First time I ever saw her was on the dockside at Belfast, and she looked magnificent. What a lovely thing she was, standing as high in the water as one of those skyscrapers, longer than 2 rugby fields, and furnishings to match the finest mansions in England. She was one of a kind, no question about it. I sailed them all, and God himself, they said, couldn't sink her. Then in 2 hours she was gone and 1,500 souls with her. Tell me, how does the old girl look after all these years? I may have been a young lad at the time, but I knew all her decks almost as good as old Thomas Andrews himself." "Well, she is a sorry state, sir," Dean said. "Over 80 years after going down and then the impact of the ocean floor, I'm sure you know she is in 2 pieces, and Bigelow nodded. "I expected as much," he said. "I saw her break in 2 before she went down. I told the committee that much when we came back to Britain, but nobody was ever sure until some guy and one of those fancy types of submarines went down to have a look," and Bigelow fell silent as he remembered that night once again. "It must have been intense," said Seamus. Oh, it was. It was a quiet night. No moon, full of stars. It was calm on deck at first, but the crew was only putting the boats away half full. They were condemning half the passengers and didn't know it. White distress rockets went up, but we should have been sending up red rockets. Nobody ever knew they didn't load us with even a few of them. I was one of the last people on the bow, and as I made my way aft to the stern, I saw Captain Smith heading into the bridge. I suppose that he felt that he should have gone down with the ship. He was that sort of a captain as a lot of people who knew him would have known. Well, there isn't much to say really except that all the boats that could be launched had been launched, so I went to the stern." Bigelow paused for a while and seemed to consider something, and then got out of his garden chair. "I've something to show you," he said, and they followed him into the house and into a large room. From wall to wall the room was filled with all sorts of ship-related articles. A wooden deck chair lay propped up against one wall and picture frames full of newspaper headlines, full newspapers, cuttings and pictures of people and of Titanic hung in frames off the walls. On the wall opposite the large window sat a scale model of the Titanic on top of a table. Taking pride of place was a large white shape on a red background. It was mounted on the wall above the model and behind a glass case. "Wow," said the magical people at the same time. "This is my Titanic collection," Bigelow said. "I collect things now and again when they come up for sale. Tell me, Mr. Potter, do you promise to get her up? As much as you can, that is." And Harry looked at his friends in turn before looking at the elderly man. "It is as good as done," he assured him. "Then you want this then," and Bigelow opened the glass cabinet and removed the large iceberg-colored star from where it had been for many years. "I took the pennant off her before she went down," He went on while folding it carefully. If you do manage to bring her up again, maybe you'd put it back where it belongs, he asked Harry in such a tone it was almost like begging. Thousands of workers labored in that shipyard. They put out many greats, but none will ever equal the Titanic. For all this time, this has been my only tie to her, my only way of making my peace, Mr. Potter, and as he finished and handed it to his fellow sailor, Harry looked at the others who all wore the same looks of amazement and awe. Harry was holding the actual pennant that Titanic was actually flying the night she went down. Thank you, sir, Parvati said quietly. I'd like to know one thing, Bigelow said. Anything, Harry told him. When are you bringing her up? Asked the sole surviving member of the ship's crew. The group looked at each other before Harry looked up from where he had been patting the White Star pennant. What are you doing next week? Harry said with a serious face. Harry watched from the deck of the ship he had chartered, and looked at a certain spot of the Atlantic Ocean with a hugely expectant look. The ship carried members of the press, which included TV crews which waited to broadcast live images of Titanic Reborn. Harry smiled at the thought of what several billion pounds could get you and how quickly it could arrive. Small submersibles were busy working at the bottom of the ocean floor, placing small amounts of explosives around the hull of the Titanic, and soon they would return to the surface and clear the area. When the subs had gone down, they had been astounded to discover the ship had become rejoined into one large piece again. It was completely unexpected and was against everything everyone knew about the ship. It couldn't be a fake, as nobody would buy a ship that big and then sink it to create one large hoax. On the last trip down, Harry went down with Bigelow and the crew found some kind of fault in the back which needed the help of nearly everyone on board. They had to settle on Titanic's forward deck, and as they maneuvered into place, a well-timed call made the pilot go back. This left Bigelow to settle it down himself after being told what to do by the pilot. The old man knew there was nothing really wrong with the sub, and they were just giving him the honor of landing on his ship once more. 30 seconds, said a voice. Harry went inside where he found the rest of his friends gathered around the underwater sonar screen. Showtime, said Seamus with a grin. Harry nodded as Dean switched on the nearest mic and turned to the channel for the whole ship. Attention all personnel and passengers. Titanic will be on the surface in under 3 minutes. Members of the press are requested to gather on the starboard side. He said, and then replaced the thing into its slot. 15 seconds, called the sonar operator. 12 seconds, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And he slapped the headphones off so he wasn't deafened by the noise of the exploding charges. 3 seconds later the second set of charges went off and they waited for the bubbles to clear before they could get an accurate reading made. When they did get such a reading, the ship hadn't moved by all that much, but it was only to be expected. Has it worked? Asked Lavender. The sonar operator made some adjustments before trying again. I'm not sure, he said. I can hear some kind of Sue, she's coming up. He shouted. People in the control room cheered as another ship's sonar agreed with theirs. Come you bastard, move, Harry said. The ship groaned in protest as her stern began to rise, and as she pulled the bow out of the mud the Titanic broke free and started begin her trip to the surface. That last hit did it. She's on the way up, said the operator. Keep an eye on her ascent speed and angle, Hannah said above the cheering people. Call the helicopter pilot and get him in the thing and ready for launch. I want us airborne and on her deck the minute she stabilizes herself, Harry said to Padma. He is already in the thing with the engine warmed up, she told him with a smile. Everyone either watched the surface or the screens as Titanic rose slowly out of the depths of the ocean. There was definably an eager tension as the sonar operator called out the readings over the entire ship. The TV crews called it into their networks and every TV news station and a lot of other stations broke their programming to show the spot where the Titanic was supposed to be. With 100 feet left to go, the ship seemed to slow her speed and Harry took the chance to go out to the deck and stand by Bigelow as he watched the seemingly endless sea. The sonar operator had stopped talking, so Harry used a handheld radio to contact him. Sonar, can you give me an approximate fix on where she'll appear? She should appear a few hundred yards off the starboard quarter, sir, the man said. Time, but the operator didn't reply. Titanic practically flying now, almost to the surface. sunlight reflecting off the waves above, and it was the first light that the old ship had seen in over 80 years. Harry was concerned that he hadn't got a reply. Perhaps something had gone wrong. "Sonar, I need a time." "How about now, sir?" came the operator, and at that moment the waters broke. A huge wave of bubbles rapidly spread across the surface, followed quickly by the fantail of the Titanic. She rose out of the water and then began to pitch forward as the stern came out of the water. The Titanic began to settle in the center of the salvage fleet. She settled back into the water, sending a large wave out to all the ships. She rode low in the water but quickly stabilized herself. The pair of ships on the salvage site suddenly blew. Every horn that could be blown was blown in triumph. She lay there listing and low in the water, but she was there. Two of her giant funnels still stood in their mounts. Her masts were gone and she was rusted, but she still held the same majesty as she had done decades ago. "My God, are you beautiful," Bigelow said quietly, and they looked as tears ran down the man's face. Harry watched him quietly for a while as Bigelow looked at the old ship while the ships moved a bit closer to Titanic. It was clear that the damage was severe as the hull had been dented and twisted in places. Most of the outer deck features had been torn from her when she had hit the bottom, but as the water fell off the decks the sunlight glinted and glimmered off her hull. "Commodore," Harry said, and Bigelow was shaken from his memories of Titanic. "I believe your ship is waiting for you," and he took the spellbound man by the hand and led him to the helicopter which waited with its blades whirling. Within a few moments, the aircraft was up in the air and heading towards Titanic. Harry had a quiet word with the pilot who commenced 2 passes on each side of the ship, 2 upwind and 2 downwind inspection passes. When they got to the stern, the helicopter went low enough for them to simply hop out and everyone landed. "Hello ship," Bigelow whispered faintly. "Oh, what has happened to you?" He shook his head as he remembered what had happened. The helicopter returned for the engineering crew that would finish making Titanic safe and fit for travel. "There is something we need to do," Parvati said, and she handed over a flat square package tied up with string. It was the ship's pennant, and Bigelow handled it like a glass figurine. "Thank you," he said with tears in his eyes. He made his way aft to the stern flagstaff as it was impossible to get to the rear mast, so the flagstaff would do well enough for the job. With slightly trembling fingers, the White Star pennant of the RMS Titanic was tied onto the jack by the string by which it had been tied with. With a few short movements, the house flag flew over the ship once more as the helicopter came back once more with the first load of engineers. It approached from aft and the pilot hovered the machine a yard or 2 away as the pennant went up and then dipped the nose down in salute before finding a spot to put the passengers down safely. The other ship was bringing much-needed equipment to pump the remaining water out of the vessel and specialists to ensure that Titanic had a workable radio system in place. "Perhaps we should go forward," Susan suggested, so the little group made their way to the bridge. They found a single skeleton slumped down by the ship's wheel, and the group became silent except for Bigelow. "This is Captain Edward J. Smith," he said. Harry called for some people to come up and deal with the body, and as they did so others came and began the work of assessing the damage to the bridge. The work continued for many hours, and as Harry was going down to have a look at the destroyed first-class lounge, a pair of engineers came up from one of the passageways that had been cleared and came up to him. "We've been down to the engine and boiler rooms," said one. "And from what we've seen it looks like one of the boilers is intact," the man said. "We had a good look around and it looks as if all the pipes and fittings are connected properly. If looks are anything to go by, we just have to light the boiler and get some pressure up and we'd get steerage way at least," the other one said. 10 knots, Harry thought for a while. "Inspect everything that is needed to get the ship moving under her own power. We'll have to have her towed to New York, though I intend to make a dramatic entrance," and the engineers nodded and went to pass on Harry's orders. "We're not that far away," said one of the marine specialists. "Thanks," Harry said, and he raised the radio to his mouth and spoke into it. "Bring Mr. Bigelow aboard and have him taken to the bridge," he ordered. "Will do," came Lavender's voice. The group had flittered between Titanic and one of the rescue and salvage ships. After a few minutes, he saw activity on the afterdeck of one ship and the helicopter lifted. Often undertook the short hop to Titanic's forward outer deck. As the rest of his friends and Bigelow came up to the bridge, one of the engineers' radios went off and there was a discussion for several moments. Boiler room reports that there is enough pressure for steerage way, said the engineer on the bridge. Very well, Harry said. Have the men in the funnels ready with the oily rags, and the message was passed along. The others and Bigelow arrived on the bridge and Harry handed them some binoculars so they could see the yachts and other small craft coming out of New York to meet them and escort Titanic in. At the bow and stern, crews detached the towing cables and watched the salvage ship steer clear and take up station port and starboard beam. I want to thank you, young man, for the chance to be here when she sailed in. Bigelow spoke quietly, but this wasn't what Harry or the others had in mind. I have something better to tell you, he said. We've been working on getting steerage way, and we managed to get enough boiler pressure for that, and Bigelow turned to look at him with surprise. In others' words, sir, she can move under her own steam into port, and the older man suddenly burst into tears. Thank you, thank you, thank you, he said over and over again. I have one request to make of you though. Harry winked at the others who wore grins on their faces. Anything, Bigelow said. Not only did I buy the rights to Titanic, but I also purchased the rights to the White Star name and branding. Now as she wasn't really withdrawn from service and owing to the fact that you are the last surviving member of the ship's crew, Harry drew straighter, you have the bridge, Mr. Bigelow, and the other man's mouth dropped open in shock before he recovered. He whispered, and then started to give commands to the people operating the emergency steering gear located deep in the ship, relayed to them by those on the bridge. Ghosts do exist. I know, began in Fox Newsman, I saw one in the mists of morning. Like some grotesque phantom that had been rejected from hell, she passed before my unbelieving eyes. Surrounded by the invisible pall of bygone tragedy, shrouded in the souls of her dead, she was truly an awesome relic from a past age. You could not lay your eyes upon her and not sense pride and sorrow together. The Titanic completed her maiden voyage today, 76 years after departing the dock at Southampton, England. A CBS commentator expressed a more journalistic view. By noon the Titanic was edging past the Statue of Liberty in a vast sea of spectators on the Battery. No one on shore spoke above a whisper, and the city became strangely silent, only an occasional toot from a taxi horn gave any hint of normal activity. It was as though the whole of New York City had been picked up and placed in a vast cathedral. Many of the watchers wept openly. Among them were 3 of the passengers who had survived the tragic night so long ago. The air seemed heavy and hard to breathe. Most people, describing their feelings later, were surprised to recall nothing but an odd sense of numbness, as though they had been temporarily paralyzed and struck dumb. Most, that is, except a rugged fireman by the name of Arthur Mooney. Mooney was the captain of one of the New York harbor fireboats. A big, mischief-eyed Irishman born of the city, and a seagoing fire-eater for 19 years. He slammed a massive fist against the binnacle and shook off the spell. Then he shouted to his crew. Up off your asses, boys. You're not department store dummies. His voice carried into every corner of the boat. Mooney hardly ever required the services of a bullhorn. This here's a ship arrivin' on her maiden voyage, ain't she? Then let's show her a good old-fashioned traditional New York welcome. But skipper, a crew member protested, it's not like she was the QE2 or the Normandy comin' up the channel for the first time. That thing is nothin' but a wasted hulk, a ship of the dead. Wasted hulk, your ass. Mooney shouted. That ship you see there is the most famous liner of all time. So she's a little dilapidated, and she's arrivin' a tad late. So who gives a damn? Turn on the hoses and hit the siren. It was a reenactment of the Titanic's raising all over again, but on a much grander scale. As the water spouted in great sheets over Mooney's fireboat, and his boat whistle reverberated off the city's skyscrapers, another fireboat followed his example, and another. Then whistles on docked freighters and liners began to scream. Then the horns of cars lined up along the shores of New Jersey, Manhattan, and Brooklyn joined the outpouring of noise followed by the cheers and yells from a million throats. What had begun with the insignificant shrill of a single whistle now built and built until it was a thunderous bedlam of sound that shook the ground and rattled every window in the city. It was a moment that echoed across every ocean of the world. The Titanic had made port. Titanic responded with a horn of her own. It was being blown by compressed air, but it was the thought that counted. The flotilla continued down to Chelsea Pier where Titanic had tugs gently turn and nudge her into Pier 59, the berth assigned to her in 1912, and then she inched along the berth until the grand old lady of the seas came to a halt. Finished with engines, Bigelow said quietly. Finished with engines, aye, sir, said one of the engineering crew. One more thing to do, said Bigelow, and Harry handed him Titanic's logbook. It had been found inside a watertight and airproof safe in the day cabin. The entry that was made would instantly become one of the most famous ship's logs ever recording. RMS Titanic arrived at her destination of New York Harbor Pier 5984 years, 3 months, 4 days and 18 minutes behind time. Signed, Junior Officer John L. Bigelow. Acting Captain. I promised I would do my best to get you here, Bigelow said, and this his burden-free heart burst and he dropped down. He was dead before he hit the bridge decking. There was a silence in the room as the sirens trailed off, and it was some time before anyone spoke. I guess he was free of any guilt at last, Parvati sniffed through the tears. Somebody better inform the authorities, Harry said quietly. Titanic's repairs had taken over 700,000 man-hours to complete, and had been the biggest repair job in naval history. The ship herself was still badly damaged, but she could now make a little over 15 knots, and had been repainted into the colors she had left Southampton in all those years ago. The upper decks had large amounts of equipment missing from the cranes, vents and masts, to guide rails, crow's nest and 1,001 other things. The main repair work would be done in what had become known as the Titanic Yard, at Harland and Wolff in Belfast, but the repairs had been made for an altogether different and more somber reason. Stop engines, the command came from the bridge. The telegraph rang in reply to the Harry's command, and the vibrations coming from the engine's room of the Titanic died away. The foam around the bow melted into the blackness of the sea as the ship slowly lost her momentum, silent except for the hum of her emergency generator. It was a warm night for the North Atlantic. The sea was glassy calm and the stars blazed in a sparkling carpet across the sky from horizon to horizon. The Union Jack and the White Star pennant hung limp and lifeless in their halyards, untouched by even a hint of breeze, both at half-mast. The crew, over 200 of them, was assembled on the foredeck as a lifeless body sewn in the traditional sailcloth of a bygone era and shrouded by the national flag, was carried out and poised at the ship's railing. Then the chaplain, aboard only for this purpose as members of the clergy are considered bad omens in a professional capacity, his voice resonant and unemotional, read the sailor's burial service. As soon as he uttered the final words, he nodded. The slat was tilted, and the body slid into the waiting arms of the eternal sea. The bugle notes were clear and pure as they drifted into the quiet night, then the men were dismissed and they turned silently away. A few minutes later, when the Titanic had made steam and was under once again, Harry sat down and made the following entry in the ship's log. RMS Titanic. Time 0220, the 10th of August 1997. Pos. Lat. 41 degrees 43 minutes 57 seconds north, 49 degrees 56 minutes 49 seconds west. At the exact time in the morning of the White Star steamer RMS Titanic's foundering, and in accordance with his final wishes that he spend eternity with his former shipmates, the remains of Commodore Sir John Bigelow, KBE, RD, RNR. Retired, were committed to the deep. Harry's hand trembled as he signed his name. He was closing out the last chapter of a tragic drama that had stunned the world, a world the likes of which would never be seen again. Harry turned to look at the ship one more time. Titanic sat in Harland and Wolff's Titanic dock like a Goliath and surrounded by all of the small buildings that made up the shipyard. From this distance it looked as if hundreds of ants crawled over her as the workers began the long task of a complete repair and refit. After that came her proving trials before she sailed the seas again. He remembered the sound that the old vessel had made as she had made her way up the Lagan River. Harry had his friends go down to deal with the boiler and to keep casting spells to ensure maximum boiler pressure. When they had done that, Harry had tied down the ship's horn so it blasted out while it had sailed into dock. With one last glance at the ship, Harry apparated home to Allcroft House. "There's another letter for you here," said Lavender as she went through her pile of letters. The group had found a large pile of them waiting for them upon their arrival home. "Might as well read it," Harry said, and Lavender passed him the letter and he read it aloud. "Dear Mr. Potter, please come back to us. It is understandable that you are angry with the wizarding world, and we are sorry that our world has failed you. Please forgive us for our mistakes. If there is anything that we can do to repay even one iota of the debt we owe you, then you only have to let us know. Should you wish it, I will resign my position as Minister for Magic in place of whomever you so choose. Signed, G. Marchbanks. Well, if they want to start repaying me, then they can award me the entire contents of the Lestrange, Riddle, Malfoy, Goyle, Crabbe and Parkinson vaults for a start, Harry said as he put down the letter. Not wanting to get on your bad side, but don't you have enough money already? Asked Padma. I wouldn't touch it, Harry said quickly, rather I would put it all together and make it into a sort of charity vault. So the profits of evil can be used to rebuild people's lives, and the others agreed. Tea's up, came Dean's shout, and he hovered a large tray of teacups into the living room. Took your sweet bloody time, said Hannah as she took a cup. They sat talking for a while drinking tea when Parvati reacted to one of the letters. This is from Ginny, she said. Harry paused, took another mouthful of tea, and then took the letter from his friend. She has the cheek to write to me. He fumed. What does it say? Asked Susan. Harry was about to throw it into the fireplace, but then decided that reading it wouldn't do much harm. Dear Harry, I know you said that I shouldn't talk or contact you ever, but I hope that you at least read this before blasting it into pieces. It took a lot of begging to Aurors before they gave me some parchment and ink. This is the first thing I've done since I arrived at Azkaban. There are not enough words in the English language to describe how stupid I have been. If Percy had not been uncovered as a Death Eater, then it was my plan to ask permission to speak to you. I wanted to explain that I was duped by my mother and father. They used to tell me when I was little that I was destined to be Mrs. Ginny Potter. Every night my mother would tell stories of how I would have to do things to make you notice me. Being in prison has made me see that I should have said no to them, but it was all I knew. After all, what girl would not want to be the wife of the brave and noble Harry Potter? Being locked in a cell all day has given me a lot time to think, and I want to tell you that I wish to distance myself from them. I know you will not think much of this, but I want to say that I am sorry about Hermione's death. I know that it is very unlikely that I'll leave my cell unless I need medical attention. I look outside, see the clouds and cry for hours on end because I will never be able to fly on a broom and feel the wind whip around me. I think that the day I leave my cell will be the day that I die. I think that that will be soon because of my broken heart. Nothing can cure that medically. Would it be too much to ask if you would visit me? Even if it was for 5 minutes, at least it would put my mind at ease and give me closure. All I want to do is to apologize in person for being stupid and foolish to believe that you would ever love me. If you want to do it, then you can come and take my memories to prove all I've said. It might mean much to you from me, but at least it would allow me to go peacefully. If you destroy this letter and do not see me, then I completely understand. Signed, Ginevra Weasley. What are you going to do? Asked Seamus when he had read the letter. I don't know, Harry replied, and he took another sip of his tea whilst thinking deeply. You stupid girl, he said at last. You stupid, silly little girl, and Harry shook his head, finished his tea and then got up. Where are you going? Asked Lavender. I'm going out for a while, Harry said in reply. The others knew what he meant, so they let him go to think. An upset and angry Harry was not a good thing for the windows, plates and other breakable items in a building. Rain came down in sheets, and Harry felt the chill set into his bones as he stepped off the small boat. The tall structure was both a fearsome and impressive sight to behold, but Harry put his mind to the task ahead of him and walked up to the thick wooden doors. When he got close to them, they seemingly opened on their own and he went inside and found a number of people waiting for him. Mr. Potter, said a short man. Mr. McKay, Harry gave him a short nod. Allow me to introduce my assistant, Mr. Barrowclough, McKay pointed him out. You understand why I am here? Harry asked. While he was talking, he was actively scanning the minds of those people around him. None held any hostile intent towards him. I do, McKay replied. These Aurors will take you to see the prisoner, and Harry was taken to the lowest parts of Azkaban. This was where the most dangerous criminals were held, and the stone passage smelled of damp and filth. It was lit only by burning torches of everlasting fire, which cast flickering shadows onto the already darkened walls. Although he couldn't see them, Harry could sense the Dementors close by. One of the Aurors tapped a cell door in a certain manner and it removed the look, and she opened the door and spoke harshly. Prisoner 74,656. Stand up with your back to the wall. You have a visitor, and in the cell, and curled up form unfolded and stood up slowly. You may go, Harry said quietly. I'm afraid that is against the rules, said the female Auror. We must be present in case the prisoner escapes, and Harry executed a heel spin so quickly, it would put a sergeant major at Sandhurst to shame. I said leave, he repeated. We don't take orders from you, replied the male Auror. You're not the minister anymore, and Harry's eyes burst into flames. That was not an order, that was me telling you. She will not escape from her cell, I assure you, but the Aurors refused to budge. I killed Voldemort, you know, and I wouldn't be too upset about adding to my tally. After all, who would take the word of 2 Aurors against the boy who lived? And with a shared look they both fled the corridor. Harry turned and entered the cell to survey the prisoner. You came, Ginny Weasley said. Filth caked her body in the now disgraceful-looking robes she wore. They were little more than the rags Cinderella would have worn, and they hung off her like she was a skeleton. Thank you, she said. It was no trouble, Harry said in reply. The cell was Spartan except for a moldy old mattress, a thin blanket on top and a bucket that Harry could rightly guess the purpose of. I read your letter. Did you mean everything you said? He asked. Yes, Ginny said. She was still up against the wall with her hands on either side touching the stone wall. You can stand easier, you know, Harry remarked, and Ginny became more relaxed in her posture. Did you mean what you said in it? He asked her, and Ginny nodded. I've been stupid, foolish, silly, dangerous and anything else you can think of, she said. Why? Asked Harry. He had noticed that Ginny was on the verge of tears, but these looked to be genuine ones. Because I grew up with stories about you. Not the real ones of course, but stories of how you would come on a big white horse and make me your wife. Remember King's Cross? I kept wanting to see you on the train. Then in my 2 years I couldn't stop stammering whenever you came close to me. Mum said that you had to see how good I would be as your wife, so she taught me everything she could to get you to marry me. Ginny stopped as she burst into tears, and she put her head in her hands as she sobbed, her entire body shaking whilst she did so. You said some pretty hurtful things to me and Hermione, Harry said. Too, I know, she said through the tears. I don't know why I said them. I was just so mad that you didn't want to be with me. Now I'll never be able to marry you at all. What is it like outside? I don't get the post much and we're not allowed to see the papers. In fact, apart from twice when I was examined by the healer here, I've never left this cell, and Harry thought about her words. You're not likely to be out of her for a very long time, you know that, and Ginny nodded. I was given 100 years, the girl said, and she dried off her tears with a corner of her tattered and filthy rags. You think that you could do that long? Harry asked her. No. I'll die before then. I'll die from a broken heart and from the shame of the mess I have put myself in. I won't even have my dream fulfilled, and Harry raised an eyebrow. What is that? Was his question. As a little girl, I used to fall asleep thinking that Harry Potter would give me a hug and a key. Ginny laughed sadly. I guess I blew that chance. Guess. I blew it for my life, and she looked at the dirty floor at her feet. What would you do to get out of here? Harry asked. Anything. I'd sleep with 1,000 people if I could get out of here. The screams of the others in here keep me up in the night. Then in the daytime I have the Dementors to face, it's just too much, Harry. Will you kill me now please? Ginny was on her knees begging. If you conjure me some parchment and a quill, I'll write a letter saying that I asked you to do it. Just please don't let me face this nightmare every single day for the next 100 years, she was sobbing again as the sorrow in her voice tore at Harry. Ginny looked to be genuinely sorry for what she had done, and even though he was more than aware of her crimes, she didn't deserve this at all. I'm leaving, Harry announced, and he turned and left the cell. Harry. The call came like the last desperate plea from a drowning person. Ginny. Harry said sharply, and she looked up from the littered floor to look at him with darkened and red-rimmed eyes. The cell door is still open. I will give you one more chance because I thought you to be like the sister I never had. You lost the trust and faith in you. Now it will have to be earned back. Then Harry's tone grew dark. I've given you another chance, Ginevra. I can just as easily break you, and then he relaxed his tone to normal again. Harry reached out one hand and gently pulled the surprised Ginny to her feet. We only have to get past the wards, said Harry as the pair of them walked down the cold and dim passageways. Harry had given Ginny a pepper-up potion on account that she was very weak. The potion's effects would do harm to someone in that condition, but Harry wasn't bothered by that as he could always heal her later on. The Aurors on the gate simply froze in a state of shock as they saw Harry and Ginny casually walking out of the main doors. The Auror who had crossed Harry's path was the first to come round, and she sounded the alarms before setting off after the pair. "Stop right there." The voice rang out over the night air. Harry and Ginny turned to see the same two Aurors who has escorted Harry to Ginny's cell hovering on two brooms. Others came running up from the prison and Dementors could be sensed close by. "Don't, just don't," Harry warned, but the Aurors opened fire with a combination of spells and jinxes to take both of them out. As Ginny had no wand, Harry put her behind a boulder and started firing stunners at his attackers. While the Aurors had more experience of fighting, they simply were no match for Harry. One by one they fell to powerful stunners, plus one large rock thrown by Ginny, until the hovering pair cast blasting hexes at Harry. He dodged them before disarming both. "Go on then," taunted the female Auror. "Surrender or prepare to be blasted out of the skies," Harry said, and his wand tip glowed with pure magical energy. "I would advise you to do what he says." Marchbank's voice made Harry glance behind him for a moment. "Evening," he greeted coldly. "Mr. Potter." Marchbanks was taken aback a moment by Harry's curtness. "May I ask exactly why you seem to have released Miss Weasley?" "A prisoner that you yourself was giving evidence against," and Harry snorted. "Well, let's just say I had a change of heart," Harry said, and then surprised her by pointing his wand at her. "Duck," and Marchbanks hit the ground and Harry blew up the Dementor which was about to attack him. "The next time you see me, is when I sail my nice new shiny yacht into harbor. I'm sure you'll get the report. Now if you want to stand a chance of seeing me again, then I suggest you put these two idiots on a full suspension without pay followed by an investigation, get rid of the Dementors. And clean up Azkaban," and Marchbanks gawped at him. "Don't sack McKay or Barrowclough though, they know their jobs," he added. Harry held out his hand to Ginny who took it as they stepped into the small boat which set off by itself. Marchbanks and the Aurors watched as they grew smaller in size as the distance got more and more. They vanished as Harry apparated them both back to wherever he had come from. "You two might as well consider yourselves relieved of duty. Go back to your quarters here, pack up your stuff and return to the ministry. When you get there, head to the Auror department and turn in your badges and explain that you are on suspension pending an investigation." Marchbanks was furious. Not with the Aurors themselves, but she didn't have much of an Auror force to begin with. Her greatest hope was that Harry wouldn't depose her the same way he had deposed Dumbledore from office. Expecto Patronum, a Patronus came from Harry's wand. "Alert the others," he told it, and the silver stag sprung away through the nearest wall. The next spell he did was the air freshener charm as Azkaban had failed to give Ginny any kind of shower or bath during her stay. In a matter of minutes everyone had arrived and stared at Ginny. Dean and Seamus had actually pulled their wands out, and they sat down or stood as they listened began to hear what Harry had done. "So long as it doesn't take all night," said Susan. "Well, you know the letter that was sent to me by Ginny. Well, I don't know how to say this, but this time I knew she was really telling the truth. When I went to talk to her in Azkaban I was appalled by the conditions. Ginny told me why she did what she did, and that she is sorry for it. As we left, we encountered problems, but Marchbanks knows of taken Ginny. I don't think we can expect much trouble from her anyway." Harry was glad that nobody was against Ginny being present. "So what do we do now then?" asked Lavender. "First thing is to get Ginny cleaned up and given some clothes that will fit her. Conjure up some pajamas for herself as well. But get her clean first and then bring her down here," Harry ordered. The 5 girls amongst them jumped to the task and led Ginny to the large bathroom on the 2nd floor. Dean and Seamus looked at Harry as if they had a question to ask, but both of them knew Harry had reasons why he kept his reasons to himself. The Ginny that came down was different to the Ginny that went up. Not a single speck of dirt could be seen on her squeaky clean skin. Her hair had been cut to shoulder length, and the girl was dressed in what looked like fluffy cotton pajamas. "They let me look outside for a moment," said an excited Ginny. "From the bathroom window I mean. I cannot wait to see what your garden looks like in the daylight," and Harry smiled before asking Ginny to sit in the chair in front of him. "Now I've got you out of that hellhole. You can just as easily go back unless you follow the rules of this house, he said sternly. You will not contact anybody in the magical world by any means. You are forbidden to use magic at all except for magical objects. We will teach you anything you missed during the year at Hogwarts. Your wand will be handed back to one of us at the end of the year with somebody else. You are not allowed to leave the house or the gardens. Tomorrow you'll go with the girls to get yourself some muggle clothing. Harry saw Ginny looking at the floor. Thank you, she mumbled. Apart from that, you'll get a crash course in muggle things so you don't cause a scene when you do go out. Now for other things. There are objects here that are sentient, and I would like it if you treat them the same as any other person. Ginny seemed to accept that, so he went on. Now I remember you used to like reading magazines. If you want to keep up with them, then let me know and something will be arranged. I'm not being evil, Ginny, but if you keep breaking those rules then you'll go right back to Azkaban. Now go with Lavender to the kitchen because there is some soup on the stove for you to eat, and Harry gave a smile at Ginny before the girl followed Lavender to the kitchen. Marchbanks is going to kill you, said Padma. I don't care anymore, said Harry. If it comes to it, then I'll simply stay here for the rest of my life. I'd even give up magic if it came to it, and the others exchanged looks. How bad was the conditions that she was kept in? Asked Dean. He was talking about Ginny. You only saw her physical condition, said Harry. She was put in the high-security cells. Hell, she isn't even 17 yet. Now if she had been an adult then I wouldn't have minded, but something told me her letter was from the heart. And I read her mind as well while I talked to her, and Seamus raised an eyebrow. You really did that? He asked in surprise. I had to be certain, replied the raven-haired boy. I meant what I said to her about the terms of her staying here. Please treat her like any other person, but keep an eye on her so she does not use the flow or anything like that, and they agreed. A short while later and Ginny came back in from the kitchen after finishing her soup. She seemed to be a lot better for it, and Harry wondered if she would be up to eating a standard breakfast the next morning. Lavender is going to show me to my bedroom, Ginny said to Harry. Will she be locking me in? The girl asked. Do I have your word that you will not use the flow to leave this house? Asked Harry, and Ginny nodded. Well, in that case the door will remain unlocked. I'm giving you a second chance at being my friend, Ginny. Please do not break my trust, and on a sudden impulse, she ran forward and hugged him. Harry patted her on the back before sending her upstairs to bed. Harry woke the next morning slightly later than normal, and he showered and dressed before heading downstairs. He followed the delightful smell of bacon, sausages, mushrooms, fried bread, hash browns and tomatoes all being cooked in the kitchen. The surprise was that the newest member of the household was the one doing the cooking. Good morning, Harry, Ginny greeted him. Morning, Gin, he said. I see you know your way around the kitchen, he added. Well, Mum taught me how to cook for when I married you. I thought I might as well use those skills to do breakfast for everyone, Ginny said, and she started turning over the bacon. I was wondering though, I know there will be chores to do around the house. Would you like me to do them? And the question was a valid one. Chores are shared between everyone in this house, said Harry. He poured himself a cup of tea from the pot. You will be like any other person here, except for not going out of the boundaries of the property and the no wand rule. Now later this morning, the girls will take you into town for some clothes for yourself to wear, and Ginny looked slightly alarmed. But I have no money, she said. You worry about getting some clothes. And I don't mean plain stuff either. If there is something that you want, then by all means get it. Same goes for your room. If you want to decorate it in whatever manner then let me know. I do have one thing to ask you though, Harry said. What? Said Ginny as she took the bacon off the stovetop and put it on a platter. Do you have any magazines or newspapers you would like to read? And Ginny nodded. Which weekly and home help, she replied. Harry made a note to talk to Griphook about it later on. He would have a copy of each by the time Ginny came back from her shopping trip. Breakfast was served at the same time that the others came down, and though it took them time to warm up to Ginny after what had happened, they treat her like any of themselves. When she came back, Harry had never seen so many shopping bags. Ginny had been brought a dozen pairs of jeans, t-shirts and blouses of different colors, multiple pairs of socks and some other items that Harry guessed the purpose of. When everything had been put into Ginny's room, the girl was given the tour of the house. She could go into any part she wanted, and the library was free for her use at any time of the day or night. The only room she was forbidden to enter was Hermione's old room. Ginny remarked about the huge back garden, and Harry smiled to himself. That afternoon she was given a talk by the others on Muggles. The youngest Weasley knew some things, but the information was at least 50 to 100 years out of date. An amusing incident had occurred when Harry had switched on the TV to watch Aquila. Upon watching it, Ginny found herself asking if this was some kind of pensive recording. Harry then explained it all to her, and Ginny grew to like TV. A week later, and her first trip to the cinema took place as she was introduced to watching films outside of viewing them on the TV. "I never thought he would be that forgiving," said the woman. "Harry is forgiving," said Hermione. "I just hope that his trust in her is not misplaced," she added. "Well, you will find out soon enough," replied the woman. "You are going back," and Hermione was surprised. The woman then explained it was a reward from the higher powers for beating Voldemort. "I guess I'll prepare myself, Mum," Hermione said to her mother. Ginny came out of her shell as the days went by, and soon her weight was back up to something near normal. During this long process, Harry had her write down everything that had happened to her in Azkaban. Apart from not giving her a lot of food, the Aurors had routinely used her as live target practice. This resulted in the use of the potions that Harry had for medical use. Ginny herself was more than happy to abide by the rules Harry set out to her, and not once did she attempt to leave the house. Harry had to tell Ginny that she didn't have to do the housework by herself, and that everyone did their part. This was after she had attempted to make up what she had done by making breakfast, lunch and tea for the first week. Her first introduction to a talking steam engine had been a complete laughter festival as Ginny had rendered unable to talk for the next 5 minutes as she tried to get her mind around the concept. She and James had clashed slightly when they compared their respective shades of red. Harry came out of the hidden life he had been leading, and he had spoken at great length about things to Marchbanks and Auror Jackson. Ginny wondered why Harry was smiling about something, but when she asked him what it was, the only reply was that she would find out later. Harry was just about to go to bed when he heard some important news. Knowing that there was not much time to lose, Harry grabbed his wand and traveled directly to the ministry where he found only a skeleton knight staff. "Who is your duty senior Auror?" asked Harry of the desk witch. "Auror Sharp," the witch said, and pointed him towards a long corridor. "Would you like someone to take you there?" she added. "I know the way," Harry told her. He made his way to the Auror department and found them in a kind of rush. Harry watched them for some time as they ran around like headless chickens. "Report," he barked. "Glad you got here," said Sharp. "We just got news that Princess Diana was in a car crash. Our French counterparts said that it was caused by dark wizards," and Harry frowned. "We let some slip?" he queried. "They don't think so," said Sharp, and Harry looked at some of the reports. "Where are you going?" he added when Harry had spun around and headed out the door. "To Paris," Harry replied. "You can't simply go and save her," Sharp said. "You'll be breaking the international secrecy statutes, you know that," and Harry paused for a moment. "I know," he said. "But I'm going anyway," and then he left. Sharp looked at the Aurors on the night shift. "Somebody get Jackson here please. I think this is a too senior job," Sharp begged, and one of his juniors went off to get Jackson. Harry looked around to gain his bearings, and decided that he should head off in the direction of the flashing lights. He arrived to find a scene of complete chaos as people took pictures or stood around gawping at the spectacle. Non, a policeman made a vain attempt to stop Harry from entering the tunnel, but Harry showed him the card he carried when abroad. If a muggle looked at it, then it would show he had diplomatic immunity. It was rather handy when Harry popped over to Calais to pick up some duty-free. Harry saw that the car had crashed badly and that one man was dead, another injured and a woman whom the entire world knew about. "Good morning, Your Highness," Harry said. "My name is Harry Potter, and I have something that will help you," and he shoved a potion down her throat. The French doctor looked at him with surprise, and then demanded to know what was going on. Harry told him, in perfect French, that it was an experimental drug, and that circumstances dictated the use of it. He then surprised the man by asking the firefighters to cut open the wreckage of the car so the princess could step out. To the sheer amazement of everybody present, The woman did so and was treated by the doctor, who simply was amazed at the rapid and almost instantaneous recovery of a person close to death. Harry meanwhile had gone into the back of the car and checked the passenger, but it was too late. With a sigh he backed out and looked at Diana. "I'm sorry," and the woman nodded and became slightly angry. "I bet it was Charles that ordered it," she said. "Him and that bloody King Camilla," she fumed. Officials from the local embassy came along and took Diana and Harry to the embassy, and arrangements were made at once for them to return to Britain. Harry though used several memory charms to make them forget that they had been there. It turned out that Diana was aware of magic, so he apparated them both to Balmoral Castle in Scotland, not that far away from Hogwarts. The security officers on the doors took no effort at all, as Harry simply made their footsteps silent as they walked up the gravel drive. They waited in the dining room for a few hours until a tall man with huge ears came in with two boys younger than Harry. The Queen, Prince Philip and the Queen Mother also came into the room while the security officers waited outside the room. "This should be interesting," remarked Diana. "Indeed," Harry replied. "Now boys," the big-eared guy said. "I'm afraid that something terrible has happened to your mother," and the elder of the boys looked puzzled. "What, Dad?" he asked. "Your mother was in a car and it was hit by another one and made to crash into a tunnel wall. She is dead, I'm afraid," the prince put on a suitable expression. The boys looked devastated as they started to believe what their father had said. "That has about as much truth to that as the vows on our wedding night, Charles," Diana said. The royal family looked around the room but could not see who had spoken. "Show yourself," commanded the Queen. "As you wish, Your Majesty," Harry said, and he cancelled the disillusionment spell on himself and Diana. Nearly every jaw dropped in the room as Diana looked to be in almost perfect condition. I don't understand," said Charles. "Your Majesty," Harry said. "What I am about to say may seem a little odd, but I can assure you and your family that this is the perfect truth. Do I have your permission to begin?" he added with a bow. "You may." The Queen sat down on the nearest chair. William and Harry rushed over to their mother, who hugged them whilst sending Charles death glares. Prince Philip was trying to understand how Harry and Diana had been invisible, and the Queen Mother had opened and closed her mouth several times before going to the door and asking for a very strong pot of tea to be brought for her. "The story starts a number of years ago," said Harry. "On the wedding night of the Prince and Princess Diana, the prince did not spend it with his new wife. He was actually spending it with another woman by the name of Camilla Parker Bowles. For years His Highness had secret meetings where he would spend the night or several with her, and Harry continued talking for a full hour. The Queen grew more and more furious as time went on, and Charles went redder and redder. "Is this true?" the Queen asked her son. "Oh, all right then, yes," spat Charles. "I never loved her," he pointed to Diana, "but I did it so I could get an heir and carry on the family line," and moved with an evil intent towards Diana and the children. "Not so fast," Harry gave a wave of his wand and sent Charles flying backwards. At the sound of the tumbling, the security men came in, but the Queen sent them right back out again. "I have never been more ashamed of you than now, Charles," she said. The head of state seemed to be thinking of something for a while. "Philip, can you get the security men in, please?" she asked. Harry spoke aloud before anyone could do a thing. "I would not bother, ma'am," he said. "Your husband is involved in this as well," and the Queen turned in her seat to face Prince Philip. "Not you as well," she said sadly. While most of them had been paying attention to the Queen, Charles had got up, grabbed a knife and then charged at Diana in an attempt to kill her and so cover up the rest of the tragic and torrid affair. However, as Harry brought up his wand to bear, the Queen Mother, showing none of the 90+ years, took hold of one of the salt pots and threw it with pinpoint accuracy at her grandson and made him stumble away. "Billy! Dave!" she shouted to two of the security men outside who came bursting in. "Take my grandson and son-in-law away and lock them up," and they did so with the aid of several other people. "Perhaps you might want to take the boys to the playroom," suggested the Queen, and Diana nodded and took them away while still wearing the clothes she had been wearing in the car crash. "You have uncovered a nasty scandal, and we thank you for it," said the Queen. "Nothing more than my duty, ma'am," Harry bowed after putting away his wand. "And in return, is there anything that your country can do for you?" "I have money after all," the Queen said, and Harry smiled as he started thinking of things. "May I sit at your table, Your Majesty?" he said, and the request was granted. With some paper and pen, Harry began to write out a list of things he wanted. Just these things, ma'am, and he pushed the sheet over to his sovereign. Myself and my friends to be knighted, permission to ride in the next state opening of Parliament, royal decree to run a train on the network whenever I want, the ability to fly in the Battle of Britain flight. I think we can do all this, said the Queen with a smile, but that faded after a moment as she went over what had happened over the last hour and a bit. It wasn't until mid-morning when Harry arrived back home, and he looked at the surprised looks on their faces. "Where have you been?" asked Hannah weakly. "Well, I saved a woman from dying, uncovered a case of adultery and got myself a knighthood," Harry said. "Oh," Hannah seemed distracted by something. When he looked at the others they also seemed this way. "What is the matter?" asked Harry. "We got a little surprised, that's all," said Dean, and he rolled his eyes towards the kitchen door. Harry followed his gaze and saw. "Miss me?" asked Hermione. Harry's jaw opened and closed like he was part of a crazy golf course. "Oh my gods," Harry rushed over and embraced Hermione tightly as he sobbed into her shoulder. Then the pair keyed for a full 5 minutes without stopping for air. "I guess you did miss me then," Hermione breathed. Harry thought how lucky he was to get Hermione back, and he grabbed her hand and started to drag her towards the stairs and the bedroom that waited for both of them. "Where are we going?" Hermione had to ask the question. "We're going to our room," Harry replied. "To do what?" asked his newly returned to life wife. "I'm going to you silly and senseless for the next 3 days," Harry said, and the girls in the room blushed a deep red. "And then what?" Hermione's voice drifted down the stairs. "Then I'm going to make love to you," Harry's reply came back. A dark secret. Harry and the group spent the rest of the holiday with Ginny, and they found that the girl was true to her word. She spent several hours per day watching the television, and she found it all fascinating as to what muggles could actually do without magic. One film though had scared her very much, and Harry found it was a program on nuclear war and the attacks on Japan in 1945. How could they do that?" she asked him in a whisper. "It is not humanity's finest moment," Harry replied. "But it was a desperate measure. Even though the Allies were winning, millions of innocent people could have been killed if Japan had been invaded. It was better to kill a few thousand in both cities rather than those millions," and Ginny considered what he had said for some time. "Then how do you win against a war with those kind of weapons?" She pointed to the screen. "The only winning move is not to play," Harry replied, and then changed the channel. The thoughts, sounds, sights and smells of war was still fresh in his mind. "I was wondering if I could go out tomorrow," said Ginny at dinner that evening. "As long as you go with somebody," Harry granted her. "Where did you want to go?" he added. "Just to those shops in the town. I've not been able to get round them all yet. And I want to buy some more clothes for myself as well," said the redhead. "I'll take her," said Lavender. "I wanted to go anyway, and so it was agreed." After dinner, a message was received asking for Harry's attendance at Gringotts the following morning at 8. Harry briefly wondered what was going on, but then he set it aside as he went to the living room. While a summons to Gringotts would have taken first place, tonight was Star Trek night. Gringotts would have to wait until later. "Why don't you come with us?" Harry asked Hermione. "You are my wife after all," and Hermione nodded and grabbed her jacket before joining her husband in the flow. A flash of green filled their vision and then they appeared at Gringotts. The pair made their way to the nearest teller, and Harry asked to see Griphook at once. The goblin led them into his office and began to explain why Harry had been called to the bank so early. "During your time away from the magical world, several of the trials took place. One of those was that of Albus Dumbledore. All of his properties, investments and other entitlements have been given to you as compensation. All you have to do is to sign for them and they become yours. I assume that you would want to go down to the vaults afterwards." Griphook asked, and Harry nodded. Once the paperwork was signed, the three took a cart down to the lowest levels of the bank. They had to walk half a mile from the tracks, and then they came upon a security dragon. "Oh crap," said Harry, and he moved in front of Hermione. Griphook seemed not to be afraid. "Oi," he shouted. "Get out of here, Doris," and the dragon started at him before moving away. "Bloody thing," muttered the goblin. Harry and Hermione looked at each with grins as they followed him. They came to a heavy metal door set inside an archway into the stone wall. Griphook muttered something under his breath, and then all of the visible locks, and the ones inside the door, clicked open one by one and then the door opened. Holy cow, Hermione gasped. From ceiling to floor the entire vault was filled with coins. There was enough space for them to walk down the middle of the vault, and Harry and Hermione crossed over to the far side where a little wooden door was set into the stone wall. What is in here? Harry asked Griphook. I am ashamed to say that I have no idea, replied the goblin. When Albus Dumbledore came to his vaults, he would ask me to wait outside. I've never seen these myself, and was surprising to both Harry and Hermione. The goblins knew what was going on in their bank, even if security was of the highest. Then again, Dumbledore had been very respected for years before Harry had brought everything out on show. Well, I suppose that we better open it up, Hermione said, and she withdrew her wand and tapped the door to unlock it. When nothing worked, Harry did the same thing and it opened with a creak. Is that you, Albus? Asked a girl's voice. You have been most remiss in your visits recently. I was sure that you had forgotten all about me. My food and water has very nearly run out, and an exchange of looks took place between the two humans and a goblin. Are you there, Albus? Asked the voice. Clearly whoever was inside knew Dumbledore's name. Harry and Hermione went in followed by Griphook. In the room was a bed, a table, a chair to sit on and a toilet and bath. The girl was sat on her bed and was wearing Victorian-era clothes. The theme fitted in with the little furniture that there was in the room. The girl looked right at them and seemed surprised by their appearance. Who are you? She asked. My name is Hermione. This is my husband Harry and our friend Griphook. May we ask who you are? Inquired Hermione. My name is Ariana Dumbledore, replied the girl. Harry and Hermione's internal body temperatures cooled as a chill passed through them. Griphook remained calm but was furious at the thought of someone being kept in Gringotts without anyone's knowledge. Could you tell me where Albus is? Asked Ariana. He has not been to see me for some time, and my food and water has nearly run out, and Harry and Hermione exchanged looks. There is something we need to tell you about, Albus, Harry said. Is he dead? Asked Ariana. Well, he isn't dead, but he has been sent to prison for doing very bad crimes. The ministry gave me his vaults as payment for what he had done. We are very surprised to see you in here. He told us you were, well, dead, Harry said. The teenaged girl was thoughtful for a moment and then seemed to remember something. My apologies, she said to the trio. She got up off the bed and told Harry, Hermione and Griphook that they could sit on it instead. Excuse me for being so rude, but perhaps you could tell me why you are wearing such strange apparel. And the two older teens looked surprised for a moment before Hermione realized Ariana meant their clothes. This is going to be difficult to explain, she began. We are from a point in history further than yours, and to her surprise, Ariana seemed to understand her completely. Albus told me what he had done. He hit me with a stunning spell and brought me here. He said he couldn't risk a freak like me uncovering a secret like the wizarding world. He told me that as long as I stayed in this room I would be alright. If I was to try and leave, then he would kill me where I stood. Time passed outside this room I know because Albus would change and get older whilst I remained my young self. Ariana paused for a moment. If he is still around, could I see Aberforth please? But Harry had to break the news that her brother was dead. When she asked if Dumbledore was the killer, they replied that they didn't really know. If I have no family, then who can I reside with? Asked the girl. You can stay with me and Hermione. There are a few other people in the house, but I am certain that they would like to get to know you, Harry said. Oh, I could not presume to intrude into your home, said Ariana. Hermione assured her that it would not be too much trouble at all. The cart ride back up was slower than the one coming down, and that was because Griphook was taking things nice and easy on the consideration of Ariana. When they reached the bank again, Harry, Hermione and the girl sat in the largest of the conference rooms while Griphook called Marchbanks to come over at once. It took her a few minutes to come to Gringotts, and she was surprised to see Ariana sitting with the Potters. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Potter, Marchbanks said. May I ask who this young lady is? She added. This is another victim of Albus Dumbledore's cruelty. Madam Marchbanks, meet Ariana Dumbledore, Hermione said, and Marchbanks opened and closed her mouth several times. Merlin's ghost, she breathed. I cannot believe my eyes. How did you find her? The minister asked. Harry and Hermione explained the discovery and Ariana told her tale from the moment she had been imprisoned by her oldest brother. "What will you be doing now?" asked Harry. "We'll have to take her to St. Mungo's to be completely examined. Then we find a family for her to live with until she is 17 inches," Marchbanks said. She gazed at the bee-owned, blue-eyed girl who sat with her hands in her lap. "I promised that she could live with us," said Harry. "The law states that she must be taken into the custody of the ministry," Marchbanks said. Ariana gripped Harry's sleeve very tightly. She was scared about what had just been said. She was afraid of Marchbanks, who seemed imposing to her. "I promised that I'd take her to my house. It is the safest place on the planet because only I and my friends know where it is located. It would take an assault by every nuclear bomb on the planet to get the wards down. Death Eaters not marked by Voldemort are still on the loose. Can you imagine what they would do to her if they got hold of her? Or for that matter if Dumbledore was to escape and finish what he started?" Harry felt the anger rise up in him. "Mr. Potter," Marchbanks began, but Hermione cut her off before she could say another word. "Madam Marchbanks, I said before that I was tired of the wizarding world. I have just about had enough of all the fighting that has gone on all these years. All the pettiness that is still around. You are talking about the letter of the law, and here we have a girl who has been imprisoned unfairly. She is very scared and just wants to know some decent food. Either you allow her to come with us, or I will cripple the magical part of Britain for the next 1,000 years." There was an ominous as Harry stared at the minister. Marchbanks was now calculating how many seconds she would last in a fight with him. When that figure failed to get past 3, she relented but said that she wanted to see Ariana when she was better. The three of them left the room and left behind a very shaken woman. Griselda Marchbanks was not a seer, but even she could have done a Trelawney and predicted her own death. Perhaps it was time that she re-evaluated the ministry and went back to start putting changes into place. First on her list would be the way that the ministry treated children with no families. Like the arrival of Ginny, Ariana's appearance at Allcroft House caused some confusion and delay. She was introduced to everyone else, and taken to the kitchen for some decent food for a change. Harry though asked Ginny to remain behind. "Now I've been watching you over the last couple of weeks, and I'm pleased by how well you have kept to the terms of your release," Harry said. Ginny simply nodded as she didn't understand what Harry meant. "Now you'll hear more about Ariana later on, but I have something to say to you. She needs a friend about her age, and you are the closest to that here. If you help her with whatever she wants to do or needs, then I might see my way to releasing you from your oath." Ginny blinked as the realization set in, and then she rushed to Harry and wrapped her arms around him as she hugged the boy tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, and then gave him a key on the cheek before running to the kitchen. Harry watched her vanish through the door and then shook his head with a smile. "I'm getting too bloody soft," he muttered. The press had a field day with the news that Ariana was still alive, and Harry ensured that Dumbledore read and heard every bit of news about her. As for the girl herself, Ariana took some days to begin to not talk in the old ways, and seemed to pick up things very easily. She did have a moment when she a screaming match at the television for not listening to her. Ariana became friends with everyone, and I spent many happy hours sat in the garden listening to the sounds of the trains passing by and the birds twittering in the air. The group discovered that she had several gifts, which included being a good artist. She wasn't as good as Dean or Ginny, but was skilled nonetheless. One night, before they had to decide on something, the group was sitting outside and watching the stars twinkle in the crystal clear sky. The moon was exceptionally bright that night as well. "Would you sing us a song?" asked Lavender of Ariana. The girl nodded and then thought for a moment before starting. "I know how the moon must feel. Looking down from the heavens. Smiling at the silly things we put ourselves through. Missing magic each day, and not seeing the wonder. That's how the moon must feel. I know how the moon must feel. Starting right and contented. Everything is beautiful, as it all should be. Far away from it all. Never meaning to hurry. That's how the moon must feel. From up there our worries must seem very small. Maybe that is why he wears a smile. I'm sure he knows if there is more to life. I wish I could be him for a while. I know how the moon must feel. Looking down from the heavens. Smiling at the silly things we put ourselves through. Missing magic each day, and not seeing the wonder. That's how the moon must feel. I'm sure he knows if there is more to life. I wish I could be him for a while. I know how the moon must feel. And I can't say I blame him. Smiling at the silly things we put ourselves through. Never taking the time. Always running in circles. That's how the moon must feel. Wow, said Dean. That was amazing, he added. He had never heard anything so beautiful in his entire life. After Ariana had blushed from the praise, they went inside to sleep. In the morning they had lots of things to talk about. One of them was the fact that most of them had one last year to complete in order to achieve their newts. Hermione said that you wanted to talk to me, Ariana said as she sat down in an armchair. Yeah, Harry replied. Now Hermione told me that you've been able to assimilate our collective memories regarding spells and things like that, and Ariana nodded. They've been a great help, she replied. Now I know all the spells, charms and things like you all do. Well, except Ginny of course, and Harry smiled. Now the reason I want to talk to you is because for the next few months I'm your guardian, and for that reason I was wondering if you wanted to go to Hogwarts. And at his words, Ariana's face light up like a pinball machine when you won a free life. You mean I can go to school? Get to learn spells and charms and all sorts of things like that? Oh yes please. Hermione has told me all about the library there. Aberforth used to read to me before Albus locked me away, and Harry's heart felt warm. Well, I've decided that I'll return as well. I'm doing this for someone I respect a great deal. The previous head teacher was killed after the final battle, and the new one is finding it very hard to have people return to the school. While I hate using my fame, if it is known that I am returning to Hogwarts, then people will think that it is safe to come back, Harry said, and Ariana could understand that. Will the healer there be able to keep the outbursts under control? She inquired. One of the things that had re-emerged after being freed from her tiny prison at Gringotts was the bursts of magic. These had been brought under control with the use of a number of potions, but she still suffered from them from time to time. Ariana could always tell when she would have an attack, and so she would go down into the cellar where she could do no harm. As these happened in the mornings, she could then enjoy the rest of the day. After talking with the healers at St. Mungo's, it was discovered that they could restrict the effects by use of a potion. These had not been around for very long, but they reduced the power of the outbursts by a great deal. It was speculated that the outbursts could even be stopped. Ariana had then sobbed for a full hour as she was told the news. I am sure she will, said Harry. Madame Pomfrey can do wonders, you know. And I do believe she is a half-decent healer as well, and they shared a laugh together. Now from one disaster to another, Hermione is cooking dinner, and Ariana grimaced. The last time Hermione had cooked, it had taken a combination of Harry, Dean and Seamus to kill the resultant mass. Thank Merlin for the fire-extinguishing charm, said Hannah as she coughed her head off. How the hell do you burn a salad? Demanded Parvati. I don't know, said Hermione. Harry came out of the kitchen with smoke pouring out behind him, and he was covered in soot marks from head to foot. I put out the fire, he wheezed. After he had got upstairs for a shower and change, he decided to take everyone out for dinner on the next train. When they got to the other end, it was found that no other train was running back. But when Harry spoke to the yard workers and several of the engines, they put on a coach and Oliver pulled them back to Knapford. The engines, their crews and other members of the railway had been surprised when they had first seen Ariana, but paid no real thought after Harry had told them what had happened. By now they had become used to seeing odd things happen around him anyway. Hogwarts had been somewhat repaired by the time that the new term had come around. Whilst it had been destroyed in the plunge into Riddle Manor, huge sections had survived the carnage, and hundreds of witches and wizards had started to build the castle again. Whilst it looked the same from the outside, inside it was very, very different. For one thing, the potions department no longer had to be held in drafty old dungeons. Because of Ariana's condition, she was given a room of her own near to the rebuilt Gryffindor Tower. This was because she would be closest to the biggest number of people who could help her. It was also like that if the attacks started near the lion's den. After the protective wards had been placed, Harry was forced to make Ariana have an attack to see if the wards stood firm. Because the girl was going to be the sole permanent occupier, she was allowed to decorate it in her own style, which was unique. She had asked Harry if she could have some chickens around the house, and he agreed, so it was her job to feed them. Harry hadn't minded at all as it provided a link to her previous life, and he hadn't had to buy eggs from the shop as much now. In the whole, Ariana enjoyed her new life with Harry and the group, and asked that she might stay with them after she was emancipated. He had chuckled at that and said she could stay with them for as long as she wanted. The day before the year started, everyone had taken sleeping potions to let them be awake during the night. This was because Harry had arranged to have Gordon pull the Hogwarts Express. To get there, he would be travel on the lines all the way to King's Cross. He would be pulling only one coach which would have the group inside. It was Harry's personal coach which he had had fitted out to his specifications, and boasted an onboard cinema. Ariana's first view of Hogwarts made her gasp as she saw the lights shining brightly over the lake. For Harry and the others though it would always be different. Whilst the main parts of the castle had been put together again by the correct use of the Humpty Dumpty spell, most of the upper floors were still missing. The only towers that actually stood was the Gryffindor Tower and the Astronomy Tower. A lot of the old guard had either died or remained in St. Mungo's undergoing treatment. After McGonagall's death people had wondered about who would get the top job. Some had asked Harry to assume the role, but he had declined saying that he hadn't finished his education yet. After much squabbling over the subject, Harry had let it be known in the press that he always thought that Flitwick would make a great headmaster someday. By an odd coincidence Flitwick was installed in the role the very next day. The sorting was a sad affair as many of the previous year's student body had not returned, but Harry was pleased to see Ariana placed into Gryffindor, though she'd be in her own room for the safety of herself and others. As Harry lay in bed with Hermione curled up beside him, he wondered if he could get permission to sail to North Korea with Titanic. Korean capers. Harry had decided that Titanic was only happy if she was full, so he invited the Queen Mother, Princess Diana and the two princes to join him, Hermione and their extended family to sail with them to North Korea. The sight of Titanic in the dockyard was one to behold as she was now repaired and seaworthy once again. Harry had done his research and had made the original fittings made. When it came to her sea trials, there had been some discussion about her watertight bulkheads, but Harry had obtained an exemption under the grandfather rights principle. Everything inside the vessel was as close to original condition, but the exceptions were the galley, one of the lounges and the small radar unit that was sat on the bow. Because of the destination of where they were going, most of the group had trained and obtained licenses for a gun, for the use of repelling boarders. There wasn't much danger of that happening though, as Titanic was currently surrounded by HMS Cumberland, HMS Chatham, HMS York and HMS Prince of Wales. Before the ship had left Southampton, the senior Navy captain had attempted to have a helicopter landing platform installed on the forward deck. Harry and the Queen had personally made him walk the plank, much to the amusement of the crew. "This is so romantic," Hermione said as she leaned into Harry. Both of them stood on the flying bridge of Titanic. Being with me on the most famous vessel of all time, or the fact we're surrounded by heavily armed warships? Harry asked slyly. "Being with you is romantic enough," Hermione replied, and turned her head Sashiki at him on the lips. "And you are also kind and considerate." The last part was referring to what was in Titanic's holds. Not counting the supplies needed for the voyage to North Korea and back, the vessel's cargo holds were filled from top to bottom with food and medical supplies for the North Koreans to use. Together they watched the Chatham as she sailed in front of Titanic through the seas 400 miles off the coast of Russia. The plan was to sail around Russia, put in a courtesy call to Japan and then go around South Korea and up to Nampo. A few minutes later, the pair of them went inside for dinner, which was served in the first-class dining room. Dinner was done in the same style, more or less, as Titanic's first delayed voyage. Starter: leek and potato soup, prawn cocktail. Main course: roast beef, roast potatoes, Yorkshire pudding, baked suet, peas, carrots, sweet corn, spring cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. Chicken Kiev, salmon, accompanied by a luxury lemo, and mushroom sauce. Dessert: glazed fruit, ice cream, strawberry, mint or coffee. Apple pie and custard. Everyone had a good dinner, but Harry, being the kind and considerate person he was, asked what the crews of the 4 escorting vessels were eating. "Curry, pizza and things like that, one assumes," said the Queen. "Well, it seems a shame that they are eating that when we are eating all of this." Harry thought for a moment, and then he looked directly at the Queen. "As Commander-in-Chief, could you give an order that the crews are to come aboard for dinner on Titanic? We have the room after all, and the Queen nodded before excusing herself and heading to the radio room to give the order. With the use of 4 helicopters, the whole fleet was well fed. One amusing point had been when one person requested to go on the last trip. When he arrived for his ferry across from HMS York to Titanic, he had arrived in his full dress uniform. When Harry asked him why, the answer was that he was going to be dining with the Queen. When Her Majesty had heard, she found the man and awarded him a medal on the spot for dedication. "Do you think we could see some magic?" asked Prince William. "I'm not supposed to show you magic at all," said Harry. "Since when has that ever stopped you?" inquired Hermione from her lounger. Harry glared at her before agreeing to the request from the eldest of the 2 princes. Harry spent half an hour doing the standard routine, and ended by sticking swords into a box which contained the Pottle twins. They both apparated out and then back again when needed. "Harry," Hermione said, and 2 heads snapped round. "Yes," they said at the same time. Hermione groaned at the 5th use of that day. "Prince Harry then," she settled for. "Your mother wants to speak to you," and he left followed by William, who seemed to want to know what was going to be said. "They wanted me to show them some magic," Harry explained to Hermione. "I guess it was hard to decide what to show them," his wife said. "Not really, but I'll show you something that is hard." Harry locked the door with a snap of his fingers and pulled his wife towards him. "I don't think we should be needed for a while," Hermione mumbled between episodes of snogging the living daylights out of Harry. He began by moving his hands over Hermione's chest and allowing them to run over her breasts lightly. Hermione allowed a soft moan to escape from her lips, and kissed Harry on the forehead. Harry let his mouth move downwards towards her navel and Hermione shivered at the sensations she felt. Harry meanwhile had let one hand snake downwards towards the space between her legs and moved his fingers in circles so they lightly brushed her warm core, and Harry's touch made Hermione go wet. Harry's other hand was gently tweaking the nipples on Hermione's breasts just hard enough for it to make her cry out, but not enough to hurt. Harry wanted this to be special for Hermione. She moved one of her hands down and took a tentative grip on Harry's hardened shaft, and gave it a little squeeze which made Harry moan as well. By now the fingers on Harry's lower hand were now dipping into the entrance of Hermione, and he let them go all the way to the hand, but slowly so she got used to it. Harry loved every moment of his life at that very moment. Hermione knelt and licked and beaked on his hardened length. Without being asked to, Hermione shuffled closer and Harry began to tease her already hardened nipples. After a while, she stopped her ministrations to Harry and took him inside herself. She kept going up and down like the pistons in Titanic's engine room. Harry was glad he used silencing charms on the room and door before they started this. "Don't stop, Harry," Hermione said, and Harry used his finger and thumb and pinched Hermione's nipples hard, something he knew she liked. "That good enough?" he smirked. "You bastard, Harry," Hermione swore. "Do that again please," she asked, and Harry complied. But while he did so, "Thought you'd like that," Harry smiled, and withdrew his fingers from her. "Oh yeah," she managed to get out. Hermione was making moaning noises and they suddenly became much more urgent and louder as she reached an orgasm. They reached one together which felt like both teens giving off waves of energy. "I think Harry and Hermione just reached an orgasm," said Parvati idly as she flicked through a book. "Who do you know that?" asked Lavender. "Because the teacup has been rattling like crazy for the last 2 minutes, Padma replied for her sister. A 2-minute-long orgasm made Hermione feel as if she was going to pass out. She slipped off Harry with a pop and rolled onto the conjured-up bed to snuggle up to him. They basked in the warmth of love-making until both had recovered enough to go for round 12. "I want it all," she said, and Harry nodded to show he understood. Hermione smiled back at him, then went back to work on Harry. She fetched a stamina potion for Harry to use and he was back to full power at once. Hermione was back to bobbing her head and she got faster and faster and she started to use her teeth to lightly scrape along Harry's hardness, making him arch his back slightly. Harry could feel himself ready to blow and Hermione's bobbing suddenly picked up speed until her head was a blur. Harry put one hand onto the bottom of his shaft and his right on Hermione's head. Using that one, he forced her head down and for the first time the tip of him went against the back of her throat and Harry blew. Wave after wave of semen burst from Harry's length and Hermione swallowed each and every bit of it with Harry pumping each drop from himself, but saving one last shot for the end. Hermione thought she had taken every bit of Harry's hot and slightly salty semen inside her, and she pulled her mouth away from Harry, and Harry let his hand go and came over her face, surprising Hermione a great deal. "Now that was good," said Harry. "Don't I know it?" his wife agreed. When she wondered how she was going to get back to their cabin, Harry simply scooped her in his arms and apparated them there. "Like that," he said, and led her to the bath that awaited them both. "Hello, Your Highness," said Lavender to William, "is there something I can do?" She asked. "I was wondering if you could answer something for me," the prince asked. "I'll try." Lavender put down the book she was reading. "Why does Harry stop talking whenever someone mentions families?" William asked. Lavender wasn't exactly sure how she could explain Voldemort to a child. When Harry was just about a year old, a very evil wizard called Voldemort killed his parents. He would have died as well if an old type of magic hadn't reacted to the killing curse, but he was left with the scar on his forehead, Lavender explained. "But why didn't somebody adopt him?" asked William. Lavender couldn't figure out an answer to that question. Luckily, Susan came to her aid and answered the question for her. "A bad man called Dumbledore put him with people who hated magic. They beat him for the rest of his life until he was able to escape from them last year," the red-haired girl said. "That must be why he looks jealous of me and Harry when Mum hugs us," William said. "That's why. For years he didn't know what a loving family was. Then he married Hermione, but she was killed by another bad man who worked for Dumbledore," Susan said. William took this in and then thought of something that didn't make sense to him. "If Hermione died, then who is that I spoke to?" he asked. "Well, Hermione did die, but then she got better again," Susan said. William tried to figure this out, and then he gave up and went off in search of some sandwiches. Harry woke in the warmth of his wife, and they looked at each other before getting up and sorting themselves out for the day. It was the day that the small fleet put in a stop to a Japanese port for a quick top-up of fuel, and just to say a hello to the neighbors. They all had a great time looking at the local culture, and even found a shop which was selling some very old books on Japanese magic spells and charms. Harry and Hannah watched as Hermione and Padma looked at all of the old books. They purchased each and every one of them, and had them shrunk down for returning to Titanic later on. "Trust the brainy bunch to find the books," Hannah remarked to Harry, who could only agree. "At least this will keep them occupied for the rest of the voyage," he said. He looked at his watch and then said it was time to pick up Susan, Ginny and Ariana from the beauty parlor. The three girls came out all perfumed and purty, as Susan described herself. Everyone was ready to board the ship, and Harry looked around at the crowds that had come to watch the departure of Titanic and her escorts. As he watched the far dockside, a small boy broke free of his mother's hold and fell into the dockside. People started screaming and Harry shoved his packages into the nearest person's arms, kicked off his shoes and jumped into the dockside to save the boy. He couldn't see him on the surface, so he went under the water and looked for him. When he couldn't see him, Harry cast a wandless Accio and the boy zoomed into his arms. His eyes were shut and he wasn't moving, so Harry headed to the surface quickly where one of the Royal Navy vessels had launched a boat to pick them up. "We need to get him to hospital," said a crew member. "But in this crowd," commented another. The ship's medical team worked on the boy and kept doing so as they loaded him onto a helicopter and took him to the nearest hospital, breaking several air regulations in the process. Sailing was delayed until Harry found out that the boy was alive and would recover. From what he had told the Japanese doctors, he had broken free from his mother's hand and fallen into the dock and banged his head whilst doing so. By the time the Titanic and the fleet set sail, it was night time and the harbor was lit up like a giant Christmas tree. They put out to sea and commenced sailing to Nampo, North Korea. As it was only a short distance as the seahorse swam, they fleet sailed at a reduced speed and Hermione showed Harry how pleased she was with Harry saving the boy's life that night in bed. "They're at it again," remarked Dean. "I wonder if we could fit their bed with dampers," put in Seamus. "A couple of vessels coming at us to starboard, sir," said the first lieutenant. "Really?" said the captain. He was surprised, but thought that the North Koreans had sent an escort ship of their own. "We better move out of their way," he said after looking at them. He gave orders to the petty officer at the wheel to turn to port to move out their way and avoid a collision. A moment later and the order was passed on to Titanic and the rest of the fleet. To the surprise of the officers and crew on the bridge, the other ships turned towards them and the captain gave the order to go to alert status. "They're signaling to us," said the second in command. He read the flashing lights sent out by the lead ship in the formation. RN ships, heave to and stay where you are. Do not attempt to be evade or you will be fired upon. I think she means to board us," he finished. "Get me the commander of that vessel," the captain ordered. "And bring the fleet to slow ahead," he added. It took a while for Titanic to slow, but they had managed it as some of the crew identified the vessels. "Captain," called the petty officer. "Two of those ships are American destroyers. The rest look like South Korea ships," and the captain asked him if he was certain about the U.S. vessels. "Sure as I'm standing here, sir," said the man. "This is Captain Lavender of the USS Blue Ridge. You are hereby ordered to heave to and be inspected. You are in breach of United States embargo rules," and the captain looked at the astonished faces. They had actually been ordered to stop in the water and be inspected by foreign powers. "This is Captain Hornblower of the Royal Navy vessel, HMS York. We will not comply with your request to stop and be searched. Your rules do not apply to us. We are on a peaceful mission and will continue on our way." The captain waited for the reply that came back right away. "You will do as ordered, or you will be boarded and your crews placed under arrest. You are breaking a U.S. embargo of all ships going into North Korea. Should you fail to stop, then you will be fired upon until you comply with our orders," said Lavender. "Captain Lavender, I will give you a formal warning. Any attempt to prevent us from completing our mission will result in this vessel considering such an attempt to be a hostile act, and we will react accordingly." There was silence on the radio. Hornblower was sure that the other vessels in the fleet would be listening. "Do you hear there? All civilians to return to their cabins. All members of ship's crew to report to stations," the message repeated several times. Harry raised an eyebrow and picked up his radio. "Bridge, Harry here. What's going on?" he asked. "Several U.S. and South Korean naval vessels are attempting to board us," came the reply from Dean. "I'm on my way," Harry said, and darted for the bridge. "Sir," one of the bridge lookouts called. "There's some activity going on the deck. It almost looks as if they're going to, missile inbound." The crewman shouted. "All hands man battle stations, close all hatches and ready damage control parties. Shoot that missile out of the air," shouted the captain. A moment later and the CIWS fired and blew the missile from the sky. "You see that we are not afraid to fire upon you. We will continue to fire until you surrender yourselves. Your crews will be arrested and taken to the nearest ports," said Lavender on the radio link. "The rest of the fleet are at action stations and awaiting instructions," said the second in command. York turned to face the oncoming vessels. Before anyone could say anything else, two lookouts shouted that more missiles were coming in. "Send to all ships, return fire," said Hornblower. The orders passed on as York opened up with her weapons and defensive systems. Everyone on Titanic watched the extraordinary battle go on, and Harry ordered the ship to get out of the combat area. He was banking on the fact that the joint U.S.-South Korean force wouldn't fire on a civilian ship. They watched as the two fleets fired at each other. Nobody commented. "Com room, bridge. Com room, I. Send the following signal, HMS York to Admiralty House. Am under attack by United States Navy and South Korean forces. Escorting ships have joined in attack. Titanic proceeding out of the combat area. Request immediate assistance from any ships in the area. Send that at once in the clear," said the captain. A missile was launched from one of the American ships and hit York below the bridge. "York's been hit. York's been hit," Dean shouted. The other three Type 42 destroyers moved towards their injured sister. Harry could see that fire and smoke was pouring from York, but she was still afloat and capable of navigation. As they had their attention on the damage, none of them noticed the missile that narrowly missed hitting Titanic until it had gone over their bow. "That was F. King close," said Hannah. Harry went for the radio set in the captain's day cabin and began broadcasting. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is the RMS Titanic to any and all ships listening. This vessel is under attack. I repeat, this vessel is under attack. Attacking vessels are U.S. and South Korean naval vessels. Request immediate assistance from any vessel." Harry gave the location of the Titanic from memory. He repeated the message and then waited a while, all the time hearing the fighting that was going on. RMS Titanic from Pongsu, a heavily accented voice spoke in English. We have heard your distress call. We are moving to intercept. Our arrival time is 10 minutes, and Harry ran to tell the good news, just as a missile hit Chatham amidships. The resultant fireball engulfed a large part of the starboard side and then faded, leaving a gaping hole in its side through which flames could be seen inside. Dear God, Hermione whispered. She could only imagine what hell was going on in the ship. That does it, Harry turned to the first officer of Titanic. Hand out weapons to the crew. Bring the ship about and prepare to engage the enemy, and the man stared at Harry before giving out the orders on the PA system. As he did so, Harry turned to the others and asked them to head into the deepest parts of the ship. As he expected, Hermione and the others said they would be staying on the bridge, but the Queen, Princess Diana, the two princes, Ginny and Ariana went down below or headed deeper into the ship depending on where they were at the time. Damage report, cried Pellew, Chatham's commanding officer. We've taken a missile hit amidships, said a petty officer. Damage control teams are tackling the damage as we speak. Fire suppression system is down in the sections affected. We've also lost most of the power lines from the engine room to the rest of the ship. We're running on battery systems only, and the captain looked around at the fighting that was still going on. Pass the word to prepare to abandon. Jesus. The captain's order to abandon the ship was cut off as Titanic stormed past Chatham and headed towards the thickest part of the fighting. As it approached, Titanic looked like the avenging angel of death as she steamed towards its target. Do we still have the main gun? He asked the petty officer. Yes, sir, the man replied. Then tell them that manual firing and aiming is authorized, the captain ordered. Then all hell broke loose. One of the South Korean ships fired a missile directly where the forward magazine was on Chatham. The ship lifted a full 5 foot out of the water and then slammed into the water again with such force it broke her back. Explosions from her internal machinery aided in her violent death. Dear God, Hermione croaked. We're going down, reported the chief petty officer. Order all remaining hands to abandon ship, said the captain. He went over to the PA system and spoke into it, not knowing that it was broken. Abandon ship. Abandon ship. All hands abandon ship. Then he looked around at the ruined bridge. Only he and the enlisted man remained. Together they ripped the ship's crest of the rear bulkhead and the captain entrusted it to the man's care. What are you going to do, sir? Asked the man. I'm going to see if I can fire any weapons at the enemy. If we're going down, then I'm sure as hell going to take them with me, the captain said. The petty officer stiffened to attention, saluted and then left the bridge so his CO couldn't see the tears that ran from his eyes. Almost as a miracle, the engine controls worked, so taking the wheel himself, he went to as much of full power as he could get and headed right for the nearest ships. They seemed to get what he was attempting to do, and tried to move away. But they failed and Chatham went up in the biggest fireball ever seen by most of the watchers. Everyone on Titanic stopped to watch the remains of Chatham go down after causing damage to several of the opposing vessels. Launch boats to pick up survivors, Harry said quietly. My God, said the captain of Prince of Wales. Yeoman, he called to his aide. Yes, sir. Make to Admiralty from Prince of Wales. Tell them Chatham has blown up. Aye, sir. Ship bearing 045, said a lookout on Titanic. Can you identify? Harry asked. I'm not sure, but it looks like a North Korean ship, said the lookout. Signal it to defend York, Harry said. The battle went on for a full hour more before a missile struck the bow of Titanic. The explosion was so great that it nearly stopped the vessel in her tracks. Luckily the impact was above the waterline or it would have faced a repeat performance of its maiden voyage. You twats, Harry said. Which ship killed Chatham? He asked. A crewman pointed out a South Korean destroyer which had turned so it was side onto Titanic. Give me full power to the engines, ramming speed, and another crewman stared at Harry with wide eyes before complying. The mighty ship picked up speed and headed towards the ship that had fired upon it. But as it drew closer, they suddenly turned away and headed off at high speed. Harry was tempted to give chase in Titanic, but he decided that the damaged ships needed his help more than the retreating vessels needed sinking. The battered but seemingly victorious fleet arrived safely in a North Korean naval port on the east coast, and they disembarked the wounded and dead first and took them to the naval hospital on the base. Dockyard workers came aboard and began the task of unloading the much-needed supplies for the impoverished country. Meanwhile, most of the passengers came off Titanic and Harry surveyed the damage to the bow. A hole about 4 foot wide was blown open, and Harry knew it would take some time to repair. He decided to have the dockyard stick a patch on it and he would return to Belfast to have it fixed properly. At the bottom of the gangway stood a small black-haired man with glasses on. "Kimmy, my dear," the Queen went over to him and embraced him warmly. "How are you doing?" she asked. "Better than you," he said in nearly accentless English. "Well, I'd like to thank you for that ship being around to help us out," the Queen said. "I suspected the Americans and our southern cousins would try something like that," said the leader of North Korea. The Queen introduced her family and then Harry, Hermione and the group. They were pleasantly surprised by the fact Kim Jong-il was well aware of magic. "We're more open about magic, you know. We are also a better country than people would think. The Americans and their allies have stopped nearly everything coming in by sea that isn't food, or other such aid. The Chinese and Russians do what they can to help, but we still don't have enough," he looked at Harry. "Of course the cargo you have in your holds will be of great help. The newest medical equipment for the majority of our hospitals. The latest medicines to give to the sick. I cannot thank you enough for what you have done," and they walked to several cars waiting for them. The President and the Queen got in the front one whilst the rest got into the 3 slightly smaller limos at the back. A welcoming banquet had been prepared for the guests of the country, and it also served as an awards ceremony for everyone in the fleet. They each received the Soldier's Honor Order and Hero of the Labour medals. The commanding officers of York, Chatham, Cumberland and Prince of Wales all received the Order of Admiral Lee Sun Sin. For the naval personnel, it would make for some very interesting talking points at the multi-navy gathering next year. As Chatham's commanding officer had gone down with his ship, the senior surviving officer had gone up to take it for him. Already questions were being asked about what had happened. A full Marine detachment had been waiting at Yokohama port to arrest and detain the captains of all the U.S. ships that had taken part in the action. The U.S. President had flown to the UK to apologize for what had happened, and said he would pay compensation for all the deaths that had been caused. The Prime Minister, an odious and vile man by the name of Tony Blair, had tried to seize power totally by saying the Queen was dead. When people mentioned the fact she had been on TV, Blair said that she was a fake planted by enemies of the state. Harry and the Queen had made multiple apparition trips, gone right to Parliament where the Sovereign had ordered Blair's arrest, and the dissolution of Parliament. This had caused a nightmare in terms of legality, but it was discovered that the Queen still had the right to do so. She returned to North Korea, after appointing representatives to rule in her place, with Chris Patten in tow. He could be the first UK ambassador to North Korea, and underlined the commitment that the UK was making to its foreign policies. The group spent the rest of the holidays going round some of the nicer parts of the country, and the dockyard finished the temporary repairs to Titanic and the surviving ships of the RN escorts. They sailed back with a couple of North Korean ships following them all the way back to Southampton. Some Death Eaters had managed to escape from being killed or injured at the final battle, and so they had attempted to cause as much damage and chaos by making random attacks. Marchbanks had attempted to do the best she could with the limited numbers of oars she had, but it was clear that prison would not work as it was already full up. It was a difficult decision to make, but the minister signed an order to have all Death Eaters whom were captured executed at the ministry. People being people, some innocent people became victims of the situation and they got executed before any sort of trial could be done. Slowly and surely the semblance of order was taking a nosedive, and Harry was seriously thinking of heading to Allcroft House and living on the island of Sodor for the rest of his life. His other plan was to move Hogwarts, finally finished and repaired, to Sodor, but he didn't know what he was going to say to air traffic control when they queried a 1,000+ years old castle flying in the Irish Sea. "Only 2 more trials to go," said Hermione to Harry. "I know," Harry sighed. "I have to go to these, but I wish I didn't have to," and Hermione could understand what he meant. The next few weeks would be filled with the cases of the last to be tried. There would be one group of idiots that had supported Dumbledore like the Weasleys, minus the twins and Ginny, and Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks would be tried together, as husband and wife. When Harry had found out the pair had married, things had kicked off big style. One thing that Harry knew was the fact that one of his father's own friends from school had betrayed him and participated in the murder of Hermione. The fact she got better and lived again had no matter in this case. "I wish you didn't have to go as well," Hermione said soothingly, "but after this you'll never have to see them again if that's what you want," and Harry took a long time to answer. "The only reason why they are going last is easy. I could kill them where they stood and feel nothing for it, but I could never hurt their child. At least I let them spend some time knowing him, only to have it cruelly snatched away," and Harry went from his wife's embrace to the bedroom to have a nap. This was an odd but cute thing Hermione had discovered. Harry was partial to afternoon naps. The only idea she could think of was that after going through a large number of traumas, Harry's magic was taking the time to settle down to something more normal. "Well, as much as I love the beds at Hogwarts, I can't wait to sleep in my own bed for once," said Daphne to her sister. "I know what you mean," agreed Astoria. "Then again, why did we never think of simply bringing our own mattresses to school?" And Daphne was stunned to figure out she hadn't thought of that. They laughed and joked as they walked down the lane towards their house, and found it smoking badly. The building was intact but an immense fire had blackened the outer walls. When both girls found their minds, they took out their wands and approached the place with caution. The windows and doors had been sealed with magic, and a type of magical fire put inside to kill anyone who was in the house. Hoping that they would find their mother was out at the time of the attack, they entered the house by blasting open the front door and searched the ground floor. They found nothing and went to the next floor, searched from both sides, and as Astoria was entering the upstairs study she saw a tall hooded figure stood over a figure on the ground. Her scream made the person turn round and start firing curses at her. In return he found himself facing several dark curses, as this was no ordinary student the rogue male Death Eater was facing. He was facing a survivor of the Battle of the Line. Another survivor arrived and Daphne joined her sister in firing dark curses off, but the man was too fast for them and blocked them off before turning on the spot to apparate. As he lowered his wand to perform the journey, Daphne hit him with a spell which might have took his arm off. When the Death Eater had gone, the pair of them went over to the person on the floor and found their mother lying on the ground, cut open and dead. Both of them screamed, and screamed, and screamed as they found their murdered parent. Seconds later and multiple pops could be heard as Aurors arrived too late on the scene. "Put your wands on the floor in your hands where I can see them," said the one who was clearly in charge. "We're innocent," said Daphne, who could see what the Aurors could see. A severely damaged house, a murder woman and two people with wands out. "I will not repeat myself again. Put your wands down and hands where I can see them." The Aurors had their wands trained on the sisters. "We haven't done anything though," said Astoria. "We just came to see our mother and found the house like this." "Why didn't you get he?" She was cut off as the Aurors stunned and bound her and Daphne in thick mummy-like ropes. "Take these Death Eater scum to the ministry. They'll face a death squad for sure," said the Auror in charge. Two other Aurors nodded and apparated with the sisters in tow. A complete scan of the affected area found that the only magical traces had been from the wands of the three Grengrasses and an unknown wand. This was assumed to be someone who was visiting, caught up by the attack by Daphne and Astoria, and had apparated out whilst being hit by a cutting curse. The girls now faced two separate murder charges. The Death Eater was wounded badly, but he would heal well enough, but the reports in the newspaper that evening made him feel all the more better. The blood traitors had been blamed for the death of their own mother and of him, and the reports said they would be tried very soon. All this was great news for him and his fellow Death Eaters who had sworn vengeance for their defeat at Harry's hands. If they couldn't kill him, then they would take his friends one by one. A plot had already been started to take the newest addition to that group of people, Ariana. Harry had been assured by Marchbanks that the Greengrass sisters would get a fair trial, but he had told her that both of them were innocent of their crimes. They had argued for some time as Marchbanks believed that they had committed the crimes simply because both of them belonged to Slytherin House. Harry had been stunned into silence as Hermione had calmly told Marchbanks she had 1 week to get the ministry sorted out or they would find someone capable of doing it in her place. "You can't simply remove a minister from power," Marchbanks said. "It's how we did the last person." Harry referred to Dumbledore, who was in Azkaban for the rest of his life and then a few years after for good measure. An extremely loud popping noise signaled the arrival of someone in a hurry, and Dean appeared in the middle of the living room with the look of somebody with bad news. He looked around for one person in particular before imparting his news. Harry, I've just been talking to Sharp. The trial's just finished for both Daphne and Astoria, and Harry's expression went from pleasant to downright stony. They've finished? He asked in the silence that filled the room. When did they begin? He asked. I don't know, said Dean, but Sharp told me that neither him or Jackson had been allowed to attend in any sort of way. From what they gathered and then told to me, Marchbanks tried them herself, the sentence is death, and Harry jumped up and made a fire call to Marchbanks' office. As they waited for her to answer, Dean, Seamus, Hannah, Susan and Ginny offered to flow to the ministry and retrieve the girls for him. Can I help you? Answered Marchbanks after what seemed like an age. You told me they'd get a fair trial. What kind of a trial could they have possibly had? Harry demanded hotly. I assure you I heard them out. I weighed their statements against those of the Aurors and I took into consideration their records and commendations. It was a difficult decision, Harry, but I dare say it was a fair one, Marchbanks said simply. They have the right to have their case heard by a jury. Harry was no lawyer, but he knew what a prisoner was entitled to. I am the Minister for Magic during a time of war. Regulations give me broad authority in this matter. Marchbanks's answer was not acceptable to Harry at all. He looked away from the flames and gave a nod to the waiting teens. Off you go, he said to them, then turned back to Marchbanks. You can quote me whatever regulation you'd like. I'm not going to let you execute my friends, Harry said to the minister. I highly suggest you reconsider that statement, Mr. Potter, Marchbanks said from her office. Minister. We have 5 people incoming with no departure point on the flow, an office flunky said to Marchbanks. She looked at the monitor herself which simply showed 5 stick figures en route to the ministry with a label saying, unknown, where it would normally say from where they had set off. Mr. Potter, why are you sending people here? She asked Harry whose head was floating in the flames of her office fire. Please arrange for Daphne and Astoria to be handed over to my people as soon as they arrive, Harry said firmly. I don't take orders from you. Marchbanks said icily. Call it whatever you like. I'm getting my men. You are making such a mistake. The fireplaces burned green for a while and then discharged battle-ready teens. Aurors had been sent to intercept them after they had arrived, but when they saw the looks they were getting, they stood down and allowed them to pass. Harry had told them where exactly they could find the Greengrass siblings, and so the group made their way to the maximum security cells and found the pair in separate cells with dirty and battered clothes. Knowing that Harry would be most displeased with the abuse of 2 people who had no parents to look after them, they took long hard looks and then tidied the sisters up before heading back to the atrium and headed back to Allcroft House. How did it go? Harry asked. Not a thing, said a disappointed Ginny. They simply let us past them after we stared them down, and Harry shrugged and then looked to the 2 new arrivals. With the additions of Ginny, Ariana and now the pair of Slytherins, the house was now full up. He wondered if Griphook could put him in touch with some magical builders in order to either add another floor to the place and conceal it from the Muggles, or to have an extension built at the back. Failing that, he could always put them up in the pool house for them time being. As it was, he remembered that Hermione's old room was free, which meant his wife lost its use. The sisters thanked Harry several times for his kindness to them in allowing them into his home. They couldn't understand the trust he seemingly gave them both. Harry had replied simply by saying that as they had stayed behind to fight Voldemort, then they could call themselves his friends. The 2 girls went upstairs to be shown to their temporary accommodations where they took a potion each and got some much-needed sleep. So what are you going to do now? Asked Hermione later that night. About Marchbanks. Harry inquired and Hermione nodded. Well, I don't really count, to be honest. I appointed her to the job because of the fact she was the only witch or wizard I knew whom I thought I could trust. I did think about old Ollivander, but he wouldn't have wanted to stop selling wands. Stan and Ernie from the night bus were right off for a start. Anyone else was caught up in the rebuilding of Hogwarts and the care of the injured. Perhaps I should simply ask for her resignation. Harry chuckled at the last bit. Well, between the Potter, Black, Bones, Abbott, Longbottom, Lovegood and Dumbledore seats, you have enough numbers on the Wizengamot to call for a vote of no confidence in Marchbanks. I guess that Daphne would use the Greengrass votes in your favor as well. In fact, I'm sure those girls would do anything for you at the moment, Hermione told him as she started to massage his aching muscles. I'll bear that in mind, Harry said, and Hermione playfully hit him on the shoulder as she worked on his neck. It might come to having to call a vote, you know. Perhaps the job simply got too much for Marchbanks to do. I'll admit she has done the best she could, but perhaps things are not the same as what they could have been. How about we go and see her tomorrow and give her a way out of this mess? And Hermione paused before asking if that meant Harry would become the new minister. You do whatever you wanted then, she added. I already do what I want, love, Harry said in a low voice. But I bet that the minister's desk would make a good thing to bend you over. Or perhaps we should get one of those restraining chairs from the courtrooms. And to her surprise, Hermione found herself getting wet from being aroused by the thought of being screwed in an office when people could walk in, and also from the idea that she could be in one of the restraining chairs from the courtrooms at the ministry. Spill it, Ginny demanded. Spill what? Asked Ariana. Even after living with the group for some time, she still didn't get some of the more modern sayings. I saw you looking at Harry, Ginny replied. That means nothing, Ariana said back. Everybody who sees him is looking at him, and Ginny shook her head. You look at Harry the same way as Hermione does, and the other girl went bright red. You think I have some kind of crush? She asked. I know it, said Ginny. Now I'm afraid you are quite wrong, said Ariana. She was now as red as a beetroot in the face. You mean you don't like Harry? Ginny asked her sweetly. Well, of course I do. Ariana wasn't exactly sure how Ginny knew things about her. Perhaps she was some kind of seer. I just like to spend my time with him, she added. That's all? Asked Ginny. Of course, Ariana tried to get the blush that was clearly on her face under control. I don't believe you, Ginny said, and Ariana decided to surrender and told the truth. Oh, all right then, I do like Harry very much indeed. I wish he could be my husband so we could live for a long time together and have a number of children. But I know that Harry has married Hermione, so I'll miss out on that. Ariana looked upset at never marrying Harry. Ginny simply hugged her and decided to speak to Harry and Hermione later on that evening, assuming Hermione was finished and satisfied. I thought I could do the job. Harry and Hermione listened to Marchbanks in her office. I think my problem was that I ran the ministry by the book, and there was a pause before Hermione spoke. Perhaps we can offer you a way out that would satisfy you, and a way that would allow you full benefits as a retiring minister, and Marchbanks peered at the young woman before asking what she meant. What you do is say that you have become too ill to be the minister anymore, and that you have been forced to retire before anything becomes any more serious, Hermione said. You can take that choice or you can take option 2, Harry said from his seat. And what is that? Asked Marchbanks. I'd use all of my seats and call for a vote of no confidence, Harry said coldly. You only have 2 seats, Marchbanks said. I have more than that, Harry replied. I have the seats for the Potter, Black, Lovegood, Longbottom and Dumbledore families. In addition to that, I happen to know that the head of the Bones family is also inclined to vote in my favor. I suggest, Minister, that you take the first option. If you don't, then you'll be out of this office before dinner, and with that both Harry and Hermione got up and walked towards the doors. Aurors. Seize them both for attempting to cause a civil war, Marchbanks called to the Aurors that had been guarding the door to her office. They came in and faced Harry and Hermione with their wands drawn and facing. There was a standoff for several seconds before Harry looked the squad leader in the eyes with the look of a killer. Stand down or I will destroy you, was all that Harry said to him. The Aurors looked between their leader and an infuriated Marchbanks. It was clear to all that the pressures of the job had got too much for her as she was demanding their immediate arrest. Then she snapped and drew her own wand and fired a nasty curse at Harry. Hermione and the Aurors saw it but couldn't react in time. It hit Harry in the back and sent him into the thick wall of the office. Hermione spun round and tripped Marchbanks ass over tit. Anything more powerful and Hermione Potter would have been facing murder charges. Outside all of you, you're sworn to silence, the lead Auror of the squad told his team. They nodded and went back outside and remained there. Hermione was crouched by the crumpled figure of Harry who was groaning in pain. Are you all right? Asked Hermione gently. Harry's only reply was to start shaking violently, and the Auror leader called for a healer to be summoned. Please stay with me, she whispered to the one person she loved with all her heart. Marchbanks was attempting to get out by use of a side door into the room for apparition, but she found an Auror's wand pointing at her throat. All my life, hissed the Auror. All I ever wanted to be was him, and he nodded in Harry's general direction. I wanted to do something for the good of everyone. You had us execute people because they bore the dark mark. We nearly killed people who the savior of the entire world thinks of as friends. Aurors Sharp and Jackson came rushing in and cut off anything else the Auror might be saying. The Auror filled them in with everything that had happened, and then watched as Jackson and Sharp relieved Marchbanks of her position and had her placed under house arrest. So what exactly is going to happen? Asked Hermione. She was filled with worry as she saw Harry lying in bed. The curse had caused him to go into a deep sleep as if he was in a coma. The healers had assured her that this wasn't the case and that he was simply sleeping. Well, we countered the organ removal curse, and healed him, said one healer. All that happens now is that we simply wait for him to wake up, and Hermione thanked the healer before they went outside the room. Hermione waited for hours on end until Harry awoke. He was checked over by the healers and told he could go home so long as he had rest for the rest of the night. Hermione was more than happy to see he was rested. After seeing what Harry had had to go through during the battle with Voldemort and his forces, all she wanted to do was to settle down and have children with Harry. Nothing was going to interfere with that plan, well, almost nothing. I can't believe that Marchbanks flipped like that. She seemed so nice during our exams in 5th year, said Hannah. It might have been the strain from doing the job. She's done it for over a year. I doubt even Hermione could run it without getting stressed like she did, said Susan. Let us just hope that whomever they choose in her place is better than her, added Lavender, and the others agreed. Well, now we can settle down, finish our educations and get good jobs, said Hermione. And have lots of children, suggested Seamus with a grin. We can't, Hermione told him. What do you mean you can't? Asked the sandy-haired Irishman. You get Harry nice and, he was cut off by Harry shaking his head. When she says we can't have kids, Myone is telling the truth, she can't have children, and Hermione broke into sobs and threw herself into Harry's open arms. There was a silence as the statement sunk into almost everyone there. But what about the eggs that got stored? Padma asked. During the downfall, some of Voldemort's forces got into St. Mungo's and destroyed the room. At least that's the official story, said Harry. Everyone could understand that he felt Dumbledore or one or more of the Order members had done the job. Couldn't you take some more eggs? Asked Parvati. When Hermione came back, it was without her ovaries. There is no way that she can ever have children, Harry said, and patted the crying Hermione on the back and started rubbing her as well in order to calm her down. Thoughts sprang through each of the others' minds, and the living room at Allcroft House was broken only by the sound of Hermione crying. I'll have your children, said Ariana suddenly. It's the least that I could do after saving me from the life I spent in that room, and that brought a small smile from Harry. Thanks, he said. How about we use that as the backup plan? He asked. I don't think that having say, with 15-year-old is going to do my record any good, Harry added with a chuckle. Bugger, muttered Ariana. As Hermione had stopped crying aloud, but was instead still crying silently, Harry led her upstairs for some privacy. The rest of them watched them and reflected on how much of a cluster life had been to the Potters. Susan was depressed more and more as the end of term came about, and it took an entire week before Harry came up with the answer. The following week was the first anniversary of Miriam's death. Susan had gone every weekend to visit her grave in the Potter family yard, but this was something different completely. The others tried to talk to her and keep her happy, Hannah mainly, but nothing seemed to do the trick. She would still laugh and smile, but it all seemed a little too fake to be believed. I'm thinking we get her royally pissed, Hannah said one evening. I agree, said Padma. Susie's been bottling it inside for all this time now, and Harry looked over at the Ravenclaw. Want me to sort out the transport? He asked. We can go anywhere we want to get drunk, and they started to plan the trip. As Titanic was still in dry dock having the dints that the Americans and South Koreans kindly gave her knocked out, there was no chance to take her out for a few hours cruising. In the end, they would visit the cities of York and Hull by train. The only way to travel though of course was to use some of the engines from the Northwestern Railway. After several telephone calls, it was decided that they would use Henry and Gordon to travel to the locations. Although Hull had a turntable at Botanic Gardens Depot, it hadn't been used for several years so the plan was simple. The Fat Controller was planning on sending an engine to York to celebrate an occasion at the National Railway Museum. The engine he would send there would do its duties and then run light engine to Hull and remain there for the special arriving. When it was time for them to come back, the waiting engine would pull them home with the first engine being dit. It took a lot of time to deal with, but a combination of the Muggle and Wizarding governments plus the Fat Controller made it possible to take place. The sun shone brilliantly as Harry entered the flow and appeared in the Ministry of Magic in London. Whilst he could have made multiple apparition hops, doing 2,485.6 miles would have taxed even Harry. Under his arm in a small box was a special candle that would mean a lot to Susan, and he lined up to wait his turn in the arrivals area of the international flow. "Name?" asked the board official. Harry was in a playful mood which was bad for the official. "Captain Sheridan," he answered. "Departure location, Babylon 5 inches. Purpose of visit, as much say, as possible. Any luggage? Just this box. What is in it? A small nuclear device which I will use to destroy the ministry, London and every living thing for 50 miles around." "Very well," cleared to enter, and with that Harry apparated on the spot. The main reason for his little trip was sitting in an armchair inside the Hufflepuff common room. Susan looked up at him with a puzzled look on her face. It lasted until Harry opened the box and presented her with a Yarzate candle to light in Miriam's memory. Susan looked at it and then gazed up at Harry. "I don't know much about Jewish tradition, but isn't it supposed to be the person's spouse that lights it?" she asked. "Under normal circumstances it is," Harry said. "But you were the closest thing she had to a partner. I'm sure nobody would mind under the circumstances," he added quietly. Susan looked back at the candle which sat in the box, and allowed the tears to flow down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, and got up and went to her dorm. Hannah waited for a moment before going up to check on her. Harry watched her head up before leaving the Hufflepuff common room, where he was always welcome, and went back to Gryffindor. It seemed a lot quieter with no Neville to talk to. Harry had attempted to use one of the married quarters for himself and Hermione, but Flitwick had denied them the use of them. "I am sorry, Mr. Potter," said the headmaster. "There is no way to give yourselves your own rooms. They are for staff use only," and Harry groaned. "Are you sure?" asked Hermione. "Quite certain, Mrs. Potter. This isn't a fanfiction, you know, where people can move from their houses into a private suite. They might just shag like bunnies, I believe is the correct term." Flitwick was being fair, and that was all they could have asked for. When Harry got back to the tower he saw that the elves had finished lining the walls and windows with black trim with a red band running along the middle. The black was a traditional mourning color whilst the red was as red as a ruby. That signified the blood that had been spilled during the many battles. "Oh, you're back," Hermione looked up from her charms work. "Just come from the Puff dorms," Harry replied as he sank into a large fluffy chair. "I gave Susan the candle. She'll be lighting it the day after tomorrow," he added. "I thought you would not make it in time," said Hermione as she finished her work. "If you hurry up, we'll still make our original time frame," and Harry nodded and got up to grab a quick shower and change into clean clothes before the group headed off to Godric's Hollow. When they arrived there it was very quiet, and they moved round to the burial plots to visit the graves of Luna, Neville and Miriam. It was a very solemn affair with the sadness of the whole battle forcing them to remember what had happened. As they stood before the headstones with their heads bowed, Harry in particular remembered the Death Eaters he had killed towards the end of the brief but bloody war. The deaths of those who had chosen to remain and fight Voldemort and his forces hung like a heavy cloak around Harry. He knew that they had made their own choice, but he sometimes couldn't shake off the thoughts every so often. As they stood and looked at the headstones, Susan moved forward towards Miriam's grave and put the candle on the ground under the headstone. Muttering a few words in Hebrew, the red-haired girl lit the wick with a silent spell from the tip of her wand. They split up into ones or twos for them to remember more privately, and Hermione went to remember her parents. She was more than aware that they were in heaven, but she still missed them all the same. Harry moved over to the two headstones he was more interested in, the final resting place of James and Lily Potter. When he left the graves, he left behind flowers and a promise to both of his parents that he would make sure that all of his friends would be taken care of. He had also talked about his life with Hermione as well. Harry wasn't sure exactly about the afterlife, but he was certain that the wind picked up and gusted for a few seconds, almost as if someone was listening to him. After they had all arrived at Allcroft House, they all boarded the waiting Bertie, who took them to the waiting train. Gordon shone in all his finery, his blue paint sparkled and his brass gleamed everywhere. The train consisted of just 2 coaches, which would allow a fast run as Gordon didn't have to pull much weight. Harry and Hermione spoke to the engine crew before departure and was handed a copy of the whole timetabled event. Outward trip. Train name, the Flying Beer Glass. Locomotive, Gordon. Departure point, Knapford. Destination, Hull. Calling points, York. Return leg. Train name, the Flying Beer Glass. Locomotive, Henry Gordon DIT. Departure point, Hull. Destination, Knapford. Calling points, none. Harry duplicated a few copies and handed them out to the group after he boarded the train. With a whistle from the guard, the train set off towards York and the first stop of the special train. Despite the long trip, Gordon was enjoying it because it allowed him to really stretch his wheels for a change. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he said to the coaches as they went along. As they rushed from the countryside, adults and children of all ages came out to see one of the most famous engines in the world. Every time they waved and cheered at him and his crew, Gordon would always whistle back and blow a little steam out to make the children happy. They reached the city of York, where the party got off and boarded a waiting limo. Whilst they went round York's pubs, Gordon was filled with coal and water by people from the National Railway Museum. As the engine simmered away in the warm afternoon, he was photographed at many angles by hundreds of people. Police from every station in the city had to be called to control the crowds of delighted people. Peep pip pip peep, Gordon steamed out of York's Platform 3, and began the short trip to Hull. Harry and the slightly tipsy people with him took anti-hangover potions as they watched the countryside passing in the late afternoon. As they watched from the tables they sat at, the staff in the restaurant coach began to prepare for the dinners that would be served later on that night. They passed through the stations of Ulleskelf, Church Fenton, Sherburn in Elmet, South Milford, Selby, Wressle, Howden, Eastrington, Gilberdyke, Broomfleet, Brow, Ferriby and Hessel before passing Botanic Gardens Depot, where they saw Henry on shed watching them as they passed over a small junction and entered Hull's Platform 4 with Gordon whistling as he had never before. Word had got around that an engine from the North Western Railway had arrived at Hull for no apparent reason. Then the word had come of another engine from that railway which was pulling 2 coaches in and out of York Station. After news had got round that the special was making its way to Hull, spotters from all over the area, and some from outside, got into cars and raced to Hull in order to record the important event. The group got off and went into another car as they began a trip of Hull's bars. Harry and Hermione had been to a few the summer Harry had spent at the Grangers. Henry came off shed to pull the coaches free so Gordon could reverse the half-mile to Botanic Gardens and use the turntable so that when he got back to the station he was facing the right way. As he did so, his coal bunker was refilled again and him and Henry backed down together back into Platform 4 where they awaited the arrival of the party. A repeat of York took place and what seemed to Gordon as more people arrived and photographed and videoed the now double-headed special. The plan was for Gordon to do some of the work before Henry took over and pulled the entire train the rest of the way to Knapford. As it was, both engines and their crews smiled and had more pictures taken. They found one last pub called The Punch, which was set between an art gallery and a shopping center. They walked in to discover it was almost like a trip back in time. The place was filled with highly polished wood and even had a wooden bar counter. A little kitchen was in the back and a portly man come out and served food to the customers from time to time. "I vote we have a small dinner here, then board the train for home," Harry said, voice tinged with wondrous delight at discovering the rich fittings inside the pub. The others nodded and sat down at 2 tables with leather bench seating or normal chairs while Harry ordered the drinks. "Can I help you?" asked the barmaid. "I hope so," Harry said. "I'd like 7 pints of Carling and a Guinness," and the barmaid nodded and pulled the pints from traditional hand pumps. Harry paid for the drinks and took them 2 at a time to the snug. "Could I have a menu?" Harry asked, and the barmaid nodded and handed him 2 of them. "Layla," said the voice of the portly man in the kitchens, 2 roasts for table 5 inches, and the barmaid, the same one that had served Harry, looked to the other barmaid. "Get that for me, would you, Jess?" she asked. "For heaven's sake, sure, Bolton," Jess replied, and she took the meals to the correct tables before returning to behind the bar. "We've only been here 5 minutes, Seamus said, drinking from his Guinness, but I feel like I could always come here," and Parvati nodded. "Reminds me a bit of the leaky cauldron and stuff," she said. "It is brighter though," Hannah put in. "True," Susan said. They pored over the menu and decided to try out the steak pie and chips with gravy, carrots, peas and fresh spring cabbage. The meal was exquisite, as Hermione put it, and it was a sentiment shared by all. After they had finished, and the plates cleared, Harry ordered another set of drinks. They finished off with promises to come back when they could, and they got into the waiting car and traveled the short distance to the station. Their departure from Hull had everyone cheering as they went past everyone. They took the same route out again as far as Selby before taking the route back to Knapford via Doncaster, Sheffield, Derby, Birmingham, Snow Hill. Crook, Gordon and Henry blew their whistles here in respect Preston, and then Barrow in Furness before passing over the bridge to the island of Sodoran. Arriving on the North Western Railway, they had a quick stop at Vickerstown for a top-up of water and coal before both Henry and Gordon pulled the train via Crovan's Gate, Merrin, Wellsworth, before pulling triumphantly into Knapford where both engines refused to work another inch due to their tiredness. Whilst both of them had enjoyed the long runs, they had become quite worn out almost as soon as they had stopped. Both engines fell asleep and so they had to be towed to the sheds by Thomas and Oliver. Both crews were happy as they had arrived well over their normal time limit and so could collect a good amount of overtime pay. As they went home in a taxi to Allcroft House where they would spend the night, Harry and Hermione already planned the start of their next great adventure, the start for the perfect hamburger. But as everyone fell asleep, they all dreamed of the great day that had happened and how they had had a good time and made new friends. With one more week to go until their educations were over, Harry and Hermione were deep into planning a massive barbecue for the last day, and high-level talks had been held with the house elves about the burgers. Both teens had made their own a few times and had found a great spice or herb to go inside the meat. Sadly though they had run out and had no idea where to get more. The group had searched every book in the potions department and in the library to no avail. It was as if the spice had never existed, so they asked the elves about the herbs, and they had brought samples of every kind of herb and spice known to man. Nothing had worked, so they pair had had to face the prospect of not getting more of the herb or spice that they had liked so much. Hermione was so desperate that she was tempted to use a time turner and find out the name of the thing, but Harry said that they should only use it for good, other words Plan B. The last few days became one of happiness at the prospect of ending their school careers, but also sad at not being able to see Hogwarts every day. Flitwick had said that they could visit whenever they had wanted, but it wasn't the same really. Of course they would get used to not being in Hogwarts, not counting the time spent in America at Salem, so Harry assumed it was because he had always thought of Hogwarts as his real home. Well, until Hermione came into his life as his girlfriend and wife later on, that is. The girl in question was going over some very old tomes she had been sent by the ministry after she had asked the assistance in finding the spice or herb. Harry smiled as he thought of every person looking for cookbooks that had been kept by past administrations for one reason or another. "Any luck?" he asked as he slipped into the seat next to her. "Well, I know it isn't anything from these." Hermione pointed to a pile of books that had to have been rejected by the girl. Harry picked up a cookbook and started reading through it. He understood well the reason Hermione liked to read books. It was the sound of the paper pages being turned over, although in this case it was parchment which made a nice, crisp crinkling sound like very old paper would have done. They had almost decided to stop looking and head for dinner when Harry saw one book that had a number of stains on the cover which could only have been picked up by many years in a kitchen and used well by a cook. With his curiosity aroused, he picked it up and started to read through it. The small notebook contained recipes for all sorts of foods and sauces. He was about to point it with all the other rejected books when he saw a picture that seemed familiar. When Hermione and himself looked at it closer, it was the same sort of tin that the mystery substance had been in. They had found it. The pair really did float down the corridors to the kitchens and asked the elves to obtain the ingredients needed for Mrs. Bailey's mixture. Elves went all over the country to get the ingredients required, and the entire group had a slightly rushed dinner before heading to the kitchens to beginning the process of making up batches of the sauce. It was decided to make it as a sauce because it was too potent for most people to have in powdered form. Because the job would take all night, and they were all tired, Harry conjured up a couple of beds so that some of them could get some sleep while the rest made the sauce. Then just as it turned 4 in the morning, Harry popped away to London and placed an advertisement in every paper he could think of. Coming soon. Harry's Hamburgers. Opening in Diagon Alley this summer. He had arranged it all with Hermione, the Potter twins and Dean. Harry would own the shop, the twins would do all the cooking whilst Dean would run the shop. Hermione would come in every week or so to look at the books and check the finances. When they had asked Harry why he simply wanted to own the shop, he replied that he wanted to own his own bus and coach company. He had Griphook looking for somewhere to put all the Routemasters, Leyland Olympians, Leyland Tigers, Leyland Atlanteans, the ones with the Northern Counties bodywork, Leyland Titan, Leyland National, MCW Metrobuses, Optare Spectra, Optare Excels, Bristol VR and VRTs that he had picked up from sales after most of them had been withdrawn from service, except the Optares which had been delivered to Westbourne Park Garage in London from the factory and stored there by order of the Queen herself. The rest of the buses had arrived in convoys of 4s and 5s over the last few months. Harry now had a bigger fleet than some other operators in the country. Hermione asked him a number of times why he wanted to operate his own bus fleet, and he had replied with the simple fact that he wanted to do something that was on his own back and not helped by the fact he was the boy who lived. His wife could understand that, and she showed how much she loved him by taking him straight to bed. Over their remaining time at Hogwarts, the pair had visited the magical hospital at St. Mungo's many times hoping to find a way of having a child. The last scan they had showed that not only had Hermione got her ovaries missing, but her womb was also absent, which meant that not even the tricky method of IVF would work with her. Flitwick had arranged for them to have a few days off as they came to terms with the news that it was impossible to have children together. It seemed as if Harry would have to use the offer that Ariana had made to him some months back. It wasn't that the pair were ungrateful, but the thought of having to have say with an underage child was not one that made Harry happy. When Ariana had pointed out that she was actually 114 years old, Harry had frowned and said that that wasn't the point. The girl, amongst others who knew the situation, had offered to carry the child all the way so that the Potters could do a blood adoption right after birth. Hermione had flat out refused because it meant taking something special away from whoever had carried the child. The day of the giant barbecue came around, and everybody had a good time eating and drinking butterbeer until the hot summer night turned to a cooler darkness in the sky. The Muggle-born, half-bloods and those purebloods that lived their lives around them, found that burgers proved a popular hit with those members of the magical world whom had never had one before. It was agreed that the new burger dining place in Diagon Alley would be a great hit when it opened. Purebloods and their quirks. The final morning at Hogwarts came all too sudden, and Harry woke in the arms of Hermione after a marathon 7-hour non-stop session. All he had to do was send the video to Guinness and that record would be theirs. He got out of Hermione's grasp, pulled on his dressing gown and then went to look out the window at the grounds. It was a very cold morning for the summer, and he could see the mist drifting over the lake and grounds. The grass shone with the dew like beads on a green mat. One more look around and then he turned to have a shower and get dressed before heading down to the broom shed and picking up his firebolt for one last run around the grounds as a student. As a lot of people couldn't sleep, they saw the lonely figure and defied the rules because they didn't give a damn. They all dressed quickly, resulting in a lot of mismatched clothing, ran down to the broom shed, grabbed their brooms and joined Harry in one more flight around the grounds. When Ginny and Ariana saw this, they woke the first-year Gryffindors and liberated the school brooms so they could also take to the air. When Flitch attempted to stop them, Madame Pomfrey cracked him one in the jaw, stunned him and altered his clothes to a pink ballerina outfit. They landed for their final breakfast together, but Harry had other ideas. Before anyone could say a word, he zoomed through the doors, into the Great Hall, raced to the Gryffindor table, went right up to the ceiling, and turned the broom down so he plummeted to the ground. When he almost hit the floor, he flipped the broom the other way round again, engaged full power, brought his firebolt to a halt, looked over at an open-mouthed Hermione and said, "Pass the salt please." It had been years since the last one had died, and now only one person remained of that final battle against the most evil of evil. 200 years earlier, sometime in the afternoon, could be lunch. Harry and Hermione actually spent most of the summer trying for a baby the normal method. Of course, this plan failed and Hermione was devastated by the fact that she would never carry Harry's child. None of the healers at St. Mungo's had been able to come up with a solution, so the Potters had a clear choice in the matter: adopt or Plan B. The second plan was always going to be the worse option of the two because of what had to be done. Ariana had repeated her offer to allow Harry to have say with her so that she could carry the child to term. When the boy or girl was born, the Potters could do a blood adoption ritual on them. Both Harry and Hermione had decided not to do that, and this was why Harry and Ariana went to the master bedroom of Grimmauld Place and spent a few hours there. Hermione remained downstairs because of her opinion that she might cause issues. The ministry was just about getting back to normal with a new minister in charge. He cracked down with the trials for those that still awaiting one. The last one though was the trial of Remus J. Lupin, and it was sure to be almost as big a trial as Dumbledore's had been. Even though Hermione had returned to life, the murder charge still stood along with all of the various things he had done in support of Dumbledore. The minister was right about one thing: it did turn out to be an interesting trial. Bring in the accused, called the court scribe. A small door opened and Lupin was dragged in wearing magical restraining cuffs. He was pulled to the lone seat by oars and pushed into it. At that same moment, heavy clamps sprang around him and bound his arms and legs tightly so he could not escape. Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. The trial of Remus Jonathan Lupin will now begin, the scribe bellowed, and then the witch sat down and awaited the start of her proper duties. I call this trial to order, said the presiding judge in a deep tone. Judge Joseph Dredd was not one to be messed with. He looked down at Lupin, who wore the orange-colored prison robes of Azkaban. I understand you intend to represent yourself, he said, more as a matter of fact than a statement. Lupin nodded before glancing over at where Harry was watching over the events. Remus J. Lupin, you are hereby charged with the following crimes: murder, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, aiding and abetting, theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, deception with intent, attacking the Lord Gryffindor, conspiracy to attack the Lord Gryffindor, attacking the Lady Gryffindor. 2b. Conspiracy to attack the Lady Gryffindor. 2b. Conspiracy to attack the head of a most ancient and noble house, bribery, corruption, cowardice in the face of the enemy, conspiracy to use unforgivables, attempted hostage-taking, conspiracy to take a hostage, littering, falsifying official documentation, attempting to break up a family, perverting the course of justice, conspiracy to pervert the course of justice, and deception. How do you plead? Dredd asked Lupin. Not guilty, replied the man. I knew you would say that, Dredd replied before glancing at the files he had in front of him. We will deal with the relatively minor offenses first, and a wizard in plain robes started the prosecution. In accordance with Harry's wishes, Lupin was offered and took chances to cross-examine anyone he so wished. The case went on for several hours before the final charge of murder was read out. Lupin asked, and received, permission to question the person currently on the witness stand. Now you dealt with the putting together of all the reports? Lupin asked a nervous young man. Yes, he stammered. Good. Now you would have had to read them as you worked, Lupin said. That's right, replied the man. Now tell me this, did you ever see any indication that I fired the weapon that eventually killed Miss Granger? Lupin asked. There was your magical trace found, the trainee Auror said. He thought it was one hell of an assignment to undertake. But that only proved I was at the place where the murder was committed, Lupin pointed out. Yes, the Auror admitted. So there is no proof that I was actually there? Asked Lupin. Apart from the magical signature, he added. Evidence was found that proves you fired the weapon, said the young man. Lupin paled visibly, and then seemed to have lost his mind for a while. May I enter into the court exhibit LH30? Asked the prosecution wizard. Proceed, said Dredd. The courtroom watched as a huge screen was conjured up which began to play memories recorded from a trip into Lupin's memories. Memory Lupin looked through the sights of the sniper rifle, and listened into the wedding service through the listening charm he had placed on the station the day before. He was just waiting for the right time to do his deadly act. The screen shimmered briefly as it changed to a point a little later on. Memory Lupin's finger tightened over the trigger. All it needed now was for a slight squeeze and that would be the end of any happiness in Harry's life for a long time. Of course everyone knew that the happiness had returned to Harry's life, but this was the actual events of that terrible day. No one apart from the investigating Aurors had viewed it, and 3 of them had gone for counseling the same day. As the court listened, they could hear the sounds of the wedding service being carried out. "Ah, it has been a while," said a voice Harry knew to be the thin clergyman. "Do you, Harry James Potter, take Hermione Jane Granger to be your lawfully wedded wife? To love, honor and cherish. For richer and for poorer. And, forsaking all others, keep yourself only for her so long as you both shall live." And Harry's voice could be heard in reply. "I do," he spoke. "And do you, Hermione Jane Granger, take this man, Harry James Potter, to be your lawfully wedded husband? To love, honor and cherish. For richer and for poorer. And forsaking all others, keep yourself only for her so long as you both shall live?" The clergyman asked. "I do," said Hermione. There was a slight pause for the rings to be exchanged as memory Harry remembered all too well. "By the power invested in me by God, I now pronounce you man and wife," said the thin clergyman. At that exact moment, Memory Lupin pressed the trigger. Bang! I've been shot," Hermione's voice said faintly in the memory. Memory Harry could be heard shouting as Memory Lupin listened to what had happened. "Healer. I need AF. King Healer here now. Get me a goddamned healer. Hang on Hermione, please hang on," and Harry was visibly shaking from the gallery he was sat in. Apart from himself and Hermione, Hannah, Susan, Dean, Seamus, Lavender, Padma, Parvati, Ariana, Ginny, Daphne and Astoria had also elected to attend. Unlike Harry and Hermione though, the others had decided to attend in full battle armor to underline not only the situation, but also in order to provide security, not that Harry needed it though. Hermione was attempting to keep Harry calm enough so his magic didn't erupt as it was prone to do once every blue moon. The recording continued playing the aftermath of the shooting. "There aren't any here," Neville's voice was heard. Harry wished how he could have had Neville and Luna with him today. "We're losing her, she's bleeding too much," he added over memory Harry's shouting. "Turn it off," Harry said quietly, but everyone heard it anyway. "There is more to be played," said Dredd. "Turn it off," thundered Harry, and the different doors to the courtroom burst into flames. Luckily though, these fires were put out by the Aurors. The recording was turned off, and Harry turned his attention to the man sat restrained in the chair. There was silence in the court as Dredd consulted with his fellow judges before coming to a decision. "We will break for a while. Please remain in the ministry until we call you back," and with that, Dredd and the judges got up and walked out at the same time that Lupin was taken to the holding cell. "You almost lost it in there," Hermione said. "I know," Harry replied. "But I still think about it every day. To see it from a recording of that traitor," he trailed off. Hermione could understand what he was thinking, and tried to imagine if the roles had been reversed. "What sentence do you intend to go for?" asked Dean from the doorway. "Something that will be very slow, very painful and very fitting," was all that Harry would reply with. They waited for well over 3 hours before they were called back by the court scribe. "This," Hannah said, "should be very interesting," and Hannah would indeed be right in what she said. "Attention on deck," shouted an Auror, and everyone stopped talking to watch Harry and his party enter the courtroom and take their places in the gallery. "I hate that, Harry Moe. Ned. Most of the Aurors knew he hated it, and so they did it as much as possible. A few moments later, and Lupin was returned to the seat as the judges filed in at the same time. "This court is in session," said Dredd, and then he looked down at Lupin who was restrained in his chair. He then surveyed the courtroom altogether as he addressed everyone. "This case has dealt with many different stories while attempting to find out the truth. We have viewed evidence that clearly shows Mr. Lupin firing the weapon. As is his right, Mr. Lupin has challenged the article. We have heard sworn testimony from sources who are more than basically qualified in their fields. We have heard Mr. Potter's testimony, provided while under the effects of Veritaserum, and from that we know that Albus Dumbledore and several others have admitted what happened. One of those persons is Miss Ginevra Weasley, who is sitting near Mr. and Mrs. Potter. They have dropped all charges in exchange for her evidence, which was given freely. But what it all comes down to is this: did Remus Lupin murder Hermione Potter née Granger? Certainly we have seen and heard facts that would support that. Those are facts from Mr. Potter, his friends and physicians in America. We have also made a legal first in that we have heard from the deceased, and that alone caused problems for me to consider. We went over this again and have come upon this decision. Remus Jonathan Lupin, it is the judgment of this court that you are guilty of all the lesser charges, and for that we sentence you to a term of 70 years in Azkaban. For the crimes of attempted murder of Mr. Potter, you here sentenced to 10 years in Azkaban prison, and Dredd paused before finishing. On the serious charge of the murder of Mrs. Potter, you are sentenced to death, and Lupin screamed with rage and let his little-known strength show. He ripped the restraining binds off their mounts and jumped up. "Where are you going?" asked Hermione. "To get you a new coat," Harry said, and he launched himself over the top of the 3 rows in front, executed a perfect roll and landed so well he would have scored 10 from the Swedish judge at skating. "You wouldn't hurt me," said Lupin. None of the Aurors or Harry's friends dared to come close for fear of Harry's magic going off. "You betrayed me, you hurt me, you killed Hermione, and worst of all, you betrayed the memories of my parents and Sirius." Sparks of magical energy crackled around Harry as he slowly brought his wand to bear. "Kill me," Lupin said, "and you'll go dark forever." Then who would be the betrayer? He asked. The aura around Harry grew in brightness and intensity as Harry muttered one simple sentence. "Virto in lupus vultus quod offero tergum," he said flatly. A blindingly hot light burst from the end of Harry's wand and hit Lupin and made him turn into his werewolf form. A few moments later, and it seemed as if his skin was peeling, and it was. Lupin howled in pain as the skin came off with the fur still on, and everyone in the courtroom watched the sight of the beam which faded from Harry's wand. Howls of pain filled the room as Lupin's wolf skin kept peeling off. When people glanced at Harry's expression they had to look away as the face was more terrifying as anything that Voldemort had ever done. Harry watched unblinking as the man in front of him was killed. When the skin had flopped to the ground, all you could see were all the muscles and bones that made up a werewolf. Moments later, and Lupin was returned to normal minus his skin. Gasps echoed round the room at the sight of the pure bizarreness of the situation, and Harry raised his wand and pointed his index finger at wounded Lupin. "Die," was all he said. And Lupin did just that. One eye on the shadows, protecting his fellows. From sun up to the moon on his back. Sent the villains to Hades, a hit with the ladies. A stallion in the sack. You can't get your life back. When right follows left Jack. The more you see the less you know. When others would leak it, his service is secret. Plays God when it's your time to go. Queen and country, safe and sound. With villains 6 feet underground. And no one knows 'cause no one's found. Any trace of a man for all seasons. Loves them and leaves them alone, so alone. And you and I wouldn't have a clue. Who's doing what, why, when and who. Up a creek with no canoe. Watch out for the man for all seasons. Loves them and leaves them alone, so alone. But safe at home. From the House of Lords, saving Norfolk broads. Commoners and landed gentry. His word his bond, whether brunette or be owned. Baby, it's so elementary. For the man never messed up your life with one stare. See the film, you'll know how it goes. But this ain't no fiction. Just check the diction quid pro quo, a pro's pro. Hey fellas, don't be jealous. When they made him they broke the mold. So charismatic, with an automatic. Never prematurely shooting his load. Queen and country, safe and sound. With villains 6 feet underground. And no one knows 'cause no one's found. Any trace of a man for all seasons. Loves them and leaves them alone, so alone. And you and I wouldn't have a clue. Who's doing what, why, when and who. Up a creek with no canoe. Watch out for the man for all seasons. Loves them and leaves them alone, so alone. But safe at home. Queen and country, safe and sound. With villains 6 feet underground. And no one knows 'cause no one's found. Any trace of a man for all seasons. Loves them and leaves them alone, so alone. Hermione had sat holding the shaking form of Harry at Grimmauld Place, and thanked the others for leaving them alone for a while. When Lupin's lifeless body had keeled over, Harry had bent down, scooped up the wolf fur and vanished on the spot. Hermione and the others had tracked him down to Sirius's old place where Harry was sat in an armchair shaking as he thought what he had just done to another person. Killing someone with the killing curse was bad enough, but to take their skin away and then kill them with a single action was nearly too much. After a while Harry stopped shaking, and Hermione led him to a bedroom where she slowly and tenderly made love to him. When Harry was asleep, Hermione rose from the bed and put on a robe before descending to the living room. Hannah was the first to see her as she came down the stairs. "How is he?" asked the Hufflepuff. "He's sleeping," Hermione replied. "Why do you think he did that?" inquired Ariana from the fireplace. "You have not known Harry as much as the rest of us," replied Lavender quietly from her own armchair. "Harry might be prone to doing things on the fly, but he has a strong sense of courage, honor and duty. Knowing Harry as well as most of us in this room do, he simply wanted to protect Hermione. While Hermione was away, he would often talk about how each day was spent looking after her. That was his primary purpose. There were days when the boys would have to hold Harry back from punching Malfoy's lights out. The weeks and months after Hermione's death were hard for Harry. He took a broom out and flew it so fast it broke up. When we found him, all he said was that he wanted to be with Hermione. Lavender finished to silence. "That is very true," said Dean eventually, and at that moment the fireplace flared up and 3 Aurors popped out and looked around for someone. "Where is Harry James Potter?" asked one. "Who wants to know?" asked Seamus. "Gaius Baltar," replied the man. "We are here to arrest Harry Potter on charges of revealing the magical world to Muggles and causing the death of Remus J. Lupin," and there was slight rustle, and the trio were faced with a dozen wands and one firepoker. "Go," said a voice, "now," and Hermione turned to see Harry with his wand pointing right the eyes of Baltar. "You are under arrest," said Baltar. "And you are under my roof," replied Harry. "I do not see why I am facing charges of murder, for you see Lupin was sentenced to death. I just got my own a new coat. Now I am sick and tired of saving everyone and then getting treated like dirt. Now hear this, Auror, do not come for me again. If the Ministry wishes to talk to me, then you send me a letter. Address it to Harry Potter and the owls will find me. Do not attempt to find me in any way, or I will destroy any man or woman that attempts to do so. Now go, Auror Baltar, go with your friends and never darken my doorstep again," and Harry started sparking with raw magical power as he slowly closed the distance. "Eep," said Baltar, and he and his partners turned and ran into the flow where they vanished. Harry lowered his wand and muttered something that was possibly in Korean. Hermione wasn't certain. "What do we do?" she asked Harry as she stood by his side and wrapped an arm around him. "We've been compromised," her husband replied. "We'll seal this place's flow off and we'll leave for Allcroft House now. Let's get away from all of the politics and scandal making," and he turned to look into Hermione's eyes. "I think I've had quite enough of this magical world," and he undid himself from his wife's hold before heading upstairs to pack. The others raced upstairs to do the same before Harry activated a trinket that acted the same way as a portkey. The difference was that not everyone had left Grimmauld Place. It was only Harry, Hermione and Ariana. Harry walked along the heavily damaged sections of the castle, saw the death and destruction that Voldemort had caused and promised that it would all end with the Dark Lord's death. He tried not to look at the broken bodies that silently awaited someone to collect them for later burial. A lot of the younger students littered the corridors and passageways, and the smell of blood made Harry be sick out the nearest hole in the wall. A lot of the dead were innocent children who had no useful information to the Death Eaters, and so they had been killed because of that very fact. As he picked his way round a mass of the dead, Harry noted that some of the Slytherins had remained loyal to Hogwarts. How many he would find out later. Acrid smoke filled his nostrils along with the unique smells of burning and burnt flesh. A lot of the bodies had missing arms, legs and in some cases legs. Some had been cut open by spell work and had their guts torn out. Harry had seen one of the classroom doors in the Charms corridor blown apart, and he looked inside. Harry wished he had not. All of the first years that the Death Eaters had captured had been rounded up and put into one room, and then someone, or a group perhaps, had clearly sent in blasting charms to kill them. Something hit Harry's left ankle, and when he looked down, he saw a black-haired Hufflepuff who had been killed while still holding onto her teddy bear. She must have caught the edge of a spell because her right side had been torn away, leaving her in a mess of blood, guts and brains, as the back of her head was missing. Harry noticed her remaining shining black hair was fanned around her and that with her pale skin, she looked beautiful even in death. He tried to turn away from the sight, but couldn't move properly for the amount of bodies. Harry shot up in bed. Hung. said a puzzled Hermione as she was woken up by her husband's screams. The bodies, Harry whispered. What bodies? Hermione asked. The bodies, Harry replied. Can't you see them? He added to her. Then he looked down at his feet. Oh gods! One of them has me, help me my own. Harry, Hermione said calmly. You're having a bad dream. None of that is real right now. Try to calm down and not think about it. She reached out a hand to his shoulder, and slowly Harry began to calm down from the terrible nightmare he had been having. They hadn't started until Padma had fallen and cut her leg open. It was only a small amount of blood, but Harry had seen it and it had triggered the flashbacks to the battle. I killed them, my own, Harry sobbed into her shoulder as she held him tight. You didn't kill them, Hermione said gently. I killed them, Harry repeated. I killed them all. If only I gave myself up, I could have saved everyone. They should lock me in Azkaban for what I've done. All those children slaughtered because of me. Harry just lost it, and Hermione held on to him as the whole grief was poured out. Those bastards, was her single thought. When it was safe to leave Harry on his own, she slipped out of bed and fetched Ariana. She had discovered that she could help calm Harry down in ways Hermione would never truly understand. She had taken her through what she did, but whatever happened, it would not work for Hermione. It turned out that Harry's grief, pain and anger ran deep, and that this was the only way to keep his magic under control. They had had to replace several items already through bursts from Harry. These had to be paid for in cash because the insurance didn't cover acts of God, the legal term for Harry James Potter. I heard, was all that Astoria said when Hermione entered her room. She had seemingly had no qualms about her choice of night clothes, and she put on a deep purple dressing gown before heading to the part of the cellar that served as her shelter during her attacks. Being in there often helped Harry to calm down from the nightmares. This particular episode took 20 minutes to vanish from Harry, and Hermione gave him a dreamless sleep potion after putting him to bed once more. Because neither of them could be bothered to attempt to sleep anymore, the two ladies showered and dressed before heading downstairs to begin the day's work. As it was only 4:30 in the morning, Hermione decided to have a kedgeree for breakfast, so she side-apparated Astoria with her to the station where they caught a lift in the guard's van of the empties that were going down to the docks. They came back with Henry's flying kipper, hopping out at the main station along with several parcels of wet fish and a bag or two of best Welsh coal from his tender. They apparated back to Allcroft House where most of the fish was put under a preserving charm to keep it fresh. As Hermione was pottering around the kitchen, she stopped and turned to Ariana. Cut out the lies, how is Harry really? She asked. He feels a lot of anger and remorse for what happened. He wishes that he could pay for what happened. He feels responsible for what happened. I have seen what happened, and there is nothing that could have been done. What hurts him the most is the memory of those children killed. Ariana rubbed her head before continuing. Harry thinks that he failed those that relied upon him. As far as he was concerned, the battle was not their fight. They had no information to give up. They had no need to die. If you want my opinion, then you should keep loving Harry and show him that it was not his fault. If he keeps going down this slippery slope, then only two can happen, she added. And those are. Hermione suspected she knew the options. He could become so desperate for a release that he kills himself, Ariana said. There was a long pause before Hermione spoke. Or he could become the next Dark Lord, and the temperature dropped by a very noticeable amount. Why will they not kill me? I have to pay for what I did. I should have turned myself into Voldemort. Why will they not kill me for what I have done? I still can't believe it, said Dean. Blocked by all means of transportation, magical and muggle. Something has happened to Harry, and he tried to think what was going on with his friend. I should have thought that the answer was simple, said Daphne. What's that then? Asked Seamus. Harry won. There were a number of people who decided that as Harry had killed Voldemort, then he had to have murdered him. Therefore, the motion was passed which called for the trial of Harry. Using every inch of power they had, they kept it in the forefront of the press coverage, and the group at Grimmauld Place wondered if Harry knew. It had been several weeks since he, Hermione and Ariana had vanished seemingly from the face of the earth. Attempts to contact them by all had only failed, and even the goblins could not tell where Harry was. Then again, this might have been because of a previous agreement between the two sides. I wish we could visit our friends, said Ariana. Well, I'm not stopping you from seeing them, Harry said. I'll get packed, and the three of us can go, said the girl, but Harry shook his head. I'm not going, he said. Why ever not? Asked Hermione. My own, I am too dangerous to be out in public. With just 1 or 2 people I am fine, but with more people around me then I could snap and lose it. Remember what happened the other day when Ari tapped me on the shoulder? And Hermione remembered. Ariana had seen Harry sitting alone by the window, and had tapped on his shoulder. Before she knew what was going on, she had been slammed to the floor and on the receiving end of several curses. After she had recovered, Ariana had made it clear that she didn't blame Harry for what had happened, but Harry had blamed himself for several days. You are as dangerous as any other person, Hermione told him gently. You have suffered more in your life so far than everyone else in their entire lifetime. You know that. Hermione saw the comprehension in Harry's eyes. It still took Harry some time to think, and he decided that he wanted to stay at Allcroft House for a while. They think he'll have died or something. Well, I'll show them what a dead person can do, Harry said to Hermione. Yeah, I'm pretty spry for a corpse, agreed Ariana. Harry chuckled as Hermione worked out that Harry was being protective again. You want us to give up magic? She inquired of Harry. Partly, Harry replied. Even with a new minister and a semi-peaceful world, these are uncertain times and we could face a magical civil war. We would be well done to leave this world before it starts, and Hermione frowned. But what of our friends? If there is to be a war, then surely they should be with us so they are safe, Hermione argued. Dean and Seamus will be all right because they can pass for muggles. Hannah and Susan will stick together as they always do. And as for the twins, I'm sure that Lavender or her family will take them in. Harry seemed as if he had worked this all out in his mind. You had this all worked out, Hermione accused. Why can you never relax for once? Start thinking of what you want and feel other than other people's, she snapped. Ariana looked and felt the tension build up in the room, and she turned around and walked out the room before she started having an episode. The clock showed the late hour 1:08. Ariana walked out of the room and into the kitchen to sit at the counter. While she sat in the relative calmness of the room, she attempted to keep her calmness as the trauma of seeing Lupin's death combined with the argument that Harry and Hermione were having gave the girl indications of the fact one of her outbursts could be appearing. Casting a warming spell on herself, she opened the back door and slipped into the garden to watch the stars twinkle in the magnificence. As she watched them high above her, Ariana wondered if Harry had done the right thing by taking herself and Hermione with him to Allcroft House. Perhaps the memories of war had been too much for him to take after killing Lupin, and he just wanted close friends and family. That in itself caused problems because the others would have turned up on the island with them. She could understand wanting to get away from all of the things that can make one go mad, not unlike herself a lifetime ago. Poor Harry, she muttered to the sky. Harry did what was expected of him to save everyone, but now the world thinks it doesn't owe him anything, and she shook her head sadly as she headed back to the house. I thought you might be outside, Harry said when Ariana walked into the kitchen once more. Then his expression grew serious. I know what you might say, but I have to ask you anyway. Can you have a look please? Harry asked. Ariana frowned before finally nodding her head. They sat down on the high-backed stools as the girl calmed herself down and became rather peaceful. Remember this, Harry, she warned him, I cannot always make these sights be accurate. Looking into the future is a tricky business, and Harry nodded before Ariana took hold of his hands inside her own and began to see. Hermione was looking through the doors to a large room, and tears rapidly fall down her face as she wept in sadness. I can't believe he died, she whimpered. The healers said the spell was quick, you know Harry was when it came to those spells, said Parvati. If only we hadn't argued for months, if only I hadn't wanted to look something up in a book so I could shoot down or confirm Harry's story, Hermione said into the other girl's shoulder. Don't blame yourself, Hermione, Parvati said while patting Hermione's shoulder. At least Harry is at peace now, she added. Ariana's eyes snapped open and she jerked away from Harry as if he was red-hot metal. Now remember what I said, she reminded him. I know, Harry assured her. Any suggestions as to how I patch up my relationship with Hermione? He asked the witch. Sit with Hermione and tell her exactly why you did what you did, and leave nothing out. I am sure that Hermione knows that you've been left scared mentally from the war and all the betrayals, and I am sure she loves you still deeply. What you must know though is that the two of you have to work this out together," and Harry wondered if Ariana was channeling Luna's spirit from somewhere. He nodded sharply before leaving to find his wife for a serious talk. "I can't believe he didn't take us," said Dean. "What do we do?" asked Seamus. "We'll wait here for when they come back," Dean answered. "And if they don't," said the former Gryffindor, "then we start panicking," was all Dean replied with all the seriousness he could muster to his friend. "Do you think they will ever come back?" asked Hannah. "I don't know," replied Susan. "After having the press follow him and Hermione everywhere when they out, I'd be wanting to get away from it all. I just don't understand why he didn't take us with him," she added. At that moment, a goblin portkeyed into the room and started searching for someone. Deciding on Padma, he went up to her, handed over a letter and then portkeyed away again. "What does it say?" asked Lavender. "I better read this aloud," said Padma darkly. "Dear all, by now you've either all started to wonder where I am, or you've made a pot of tea. Myself, Hermione and Ariana have gone to Allcroft House to get away from all of the public attention. While I would have liked to have brought you with us, most of you have not seen your families for a long time. Take this time to see your family before something terrible happens. While I am away, each of you has a job to do for me. I would like you all to run my business interests in my place until we return, which might be some time. A meeting has been arranged between yourselves and Griphook tomorrow morning. While there, he will set up Ginny with small funds to pay for her last year at Hogwarts. The press will no doubt try to contact me while we're away, so please just tell them that I'm not far wrong and that I will talk to them as soon as. One more thing, I've cut off all portkey and flow access to Allcroft House for reasons that I, and I alone, must know." "Harry, so what does that tell us?" asked Lavender to the ensuing silence. The morning broke over the island of Sodor, and Hermione found that Harry was not in the bed with her. She got out of bed, showered, dressed and quietly went downstairs where she found a note on the dining room table. Hermione decided to catch a ride to the docks to get some fresh fish. "We'll be back as soon as possible. Harry. P.S. And Ariana too." With one thing off her mind, Hermione set about making the first pot of tea for the day. She flicked on the radio and listened to the shipping forecast and then heard a rather good song called "He's a Really Useful Engine" by some band called Clearwater Productions. At about 6:30, Harry and Ariana came in with a couple of parcels of fresh fish under their arms. "Hi, Hermione," beamed Ariana brightly. "Look what we got." And she opened her parcel on a kitchen work area. "I see you had a good time," said Hermione as she noticed the smudged and sooty clothes Ariana and Harry wore. "I'll stick a preserving charm on these while you get upstairs and get cleaned off. I'll have breakfast ready for you to eat when you get down," and Harry and Ariana snapped off salutes that built the British Army before turning on their heels and headed for the bathrooms. When they came down again, Hermione had made bacon, eggs, fried bread, mushrooms, sausages, hash browns, fried tomatoes and toast. As they listened to the radio, the trio talked about what they would be doing that day. Ariana decided to go to the station and talk to the engines as they came in and out of the station, while Harry and Hermione would be working on ways to supplement the wards protecting Allcroft House. One result of this would be the elimination of all information regarding the location of the house from the memories of those who had no need to know. All written records would be destroyed as well so as to make doubly sure of the security measures. It was the middle of the afternoon when Harry and Hermione had finished with all the new wards. They had keyed their friends into it so they could get in, when Harry was ready that was. They made themselves some lunch before sitting down in the library to talk. "How long do we have to keep this up?" asked Hermione. "Look, my own, I know how you feel about this, I really do. But I just want to have time away from the magical world for a while. Maybe we'll go back after a while, but for now, Hermione, please let me know and experience what it means to be a normal person," and Hermione realized how deep Harry's problems went. She knew about the abuse from the Dursleys, from Malfoy and his goons, never knowing if he would be attacked at school, and she began to cry. Harry simply sighed and patted Hermione on the shoulders and hugged her tightly. When she had calmed down, she asked her husband if there was anything that he wanted to do. Harry thought about it for a moment, but shook his head. All I want is to know what a normal life is like, and then we'll return, that I promise to you my own," and he leant forwards and kissed her on the lips. "Point me the nearest bathroom," Ariana said to her wand. "I think I am going to be quite sick," and walked away. After a full week, Harry decided that it was time for them to return to the magical world. One of the first things Harry intended to do was to have a good clear out of Grimmauld Place. It was rather fitting that Padma, a fellow Ravenclaw, had found it that morning, and she called the others together to view it. Nobody had had the heart to go through the items of either Neville or Luna, but Padma had heard a rattling in one of Luna's old trunks. She had opened it up to see something she had not expected. Harry looked at the square stone as it lit up and hummed with power. Then with a shimmer, an image of Luna Celeste Lovegood appeared before the assembled people. "Oh God," Harry whispered as he closed his eyes. "Hello, my friends. You are here now watching this image of me because I have died. It probably happened while I was saving people, and quickly, which is what I expected. Never forget I died doing exactly what I chose to do. What I want you to know is how much I loved my life and those of you who shared it with me. You are my family. You all know where I came from and what my life was like before. I have been blessed with your friendship and your love." Luna looked around the gathered teens and found each person in turn. "Hannah, Susan and Padma, you are the best. You trusted me, you encouraged me, and most of all you made me laugh. Lavender and Parvati, you are capable of so much love. You taught me without ever having to say a word. I realized I could be feminine without losing anything. Dean, I'm sorry I won't be able to see you grow into the exceptional man you'll become, but your kindness and friendship are ageless. Ah, Seamus, we are so much alike, you and I. Both warriors, sort of orphans who found ourselves this family. I hope I met death with my eyes wide open. Hermione, your fierce devotion comes from within and can't be diminished. From you, I have learned to strive for excellence no matter what the personal cost. My boyfriend, Neville, and Harry Moe. Net and an expression of pain filled his face as this had clearly been recorded before her death. In those moments I felt the most despair. You took my hand and helped me to see things differently. You taught me to look beyond the moment. You see things with the wonder of a child, and that makes you more human than any of us. I am just sorry that we didn't get to be married and have a number of children. The witch, or wizard, that marries you will be lucky only to Hermione and Harry in terms of happiness. Mr. Harry James Potter, you were one of my first friends at Hogwarts. You didn't make fun of what I thought or believed in. You allowed me to stay when I arrived with the others after leaving Hogwarts. If there was someone in this universe I could choose to be like, someone who I would want to make proud of me, it's you. You who have the heart of a warrior, the soul of a just person and the soul of a poet. So, you'll understand when I say, death is that state in which one exists only in the memory of others. Which is why it is not an end, no goodbyes, just good memories. I'd better be going now because dinner is being served. Goodbye, my dear, dear friends, and the image shimmered away. Silence rebounded around the room as everyone was quiet after watching the recording of Luna's last statement. Au revoir, Luna, Harry whispered into the silence. A moment later, and he turned round and headed for the flow. Where are you going? Asked Hermione. Out, and Harry flowed away. Oh shit, said Lavender. It was a sentiment shared by all present. Hermione concentrated on where Harry was, and imagined him in a fight with Aurors. To Azkaban, she called loudly. They went directly to Azkaban, with some effort, and saw a walking human torch that had to be Harry. All around them lay the battered and defeated Aurors who guarded the prison. Harry. But Harry either didn't hear her or simply ignored her as he went into the deepest parts of the prison with the group following them. They found him inside the only cell which had no door, and Harry was covering the figure of Albus Dumbledore with his wand. Don't kill him, she pleaded with him. No, I won't kill him, Harry growled. I want him to know the same pain I have felt because of his meddling, and Hermione thought that he was going to attack Dumbledore, who looked at Harry and the rest with puzzlement. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he sensed that he might have a chance to resume his rightful place. What you have been through has been a mistake, he said carefully. Help me to get out of here, and I will forgive you for what you have done. And Hermione, Ariana and the rest couldn't believe what Dumbledore was saying. He was making out that it was all Harry's fault. As for the man in question, he simply smiled grimly and brought his wand to bear on Dumbledore's head. Defend yourself, and Harry entered Dumbledore's mind. Despite the time in Azkaban, Dumbledore still possessed his mental shields, but Harry tore right through them like they did not exist. Once he had reached the former headmaster's mind, Harry gifted him the memories of every time he had ever been hurt by the Dursleys, the times he had been hurt by Death Eaters, the more recent memories of Hermione's death, and the guilt he had felt for the deaths of those people killed or disabled at the Battle of the Line. He poured them all in by overriding any attempts by Dumbledore to stop him. Once he was satisfied with what he had done, Harry withdrew from his mind to observe the results of what he had done. Gods, Hannah whispered. They had all watched as Harry mentally assaulted Dumbledore, and when he was done, their former headmaster had hung his head and started sobbing. Please, he said in a half-sob and half-whisper, please kill me, and Harry leaned in and spoke in such a low voice that they nearly didn't hear him. I am going to do far worse than kill you, Dumbledore, he said into his ear, I'm going to let you live, and with one last look at him, Harry fell into Hermione's open arms and started to cry. Let's get out of here, and they took Harry away, knowing he would never have to see Dumbledore again. Harry felt free for the first time in many months, and he was able to put away the feelings he had tried to bury so much. As he was the savior of the magical world, everybody asked him for his help, but he refused nearly each and every one of them unless it was from people who had tried all other options first. Those included orphanages and medical research. The first thing he did after nearly killing Dumbledore with the rush of memories was to take Hermione to the master bedroom and screw her for nearly a full week. When they emerged afterwards, they found 2 squads of Aurors and a team of Cursebreakers attempting to get in. It turned out that everyone thought they had been captured. The months and eventually years passed, and the group all stayed in touch as they got married, had children and got on with careers, most of them working for Harry in one of his businesses. He asked them to work for him because he wanted people he could trust. One happy moment for Harry and Hermione was the birth of their first child, though this was after a great deal of trouble involving Ariana, rituals, potions and 6 gun-toting rubber ducks. They named their firstborn child James Sirius, and their first daughter born 9 months later Andromeda Excelsior Destiny Rhapsody Melody Harmony Symphony Potter. It was 4 years after all was right when Harry and Hermione got a letter saying that Dumbledore had died after jumping into the rocks outside his cell during his monthly 2 hours out Azkaban for exercise. From time to time, Harry went to Hogwarts and gave talks about his experiences about fighting Voldemort and his followers. He did this because he felt it was important for the younger generation to know what happened if you let evil fester in amongst themselves. Hogwarts itself was now under the leadership of Professor R. Sharp, a man who had written several books about Harry, all successful. He was also a rather dab hand at teaching. Harry was the last to die at the age of 250 whilst on a broomstick. When asked how he wanted to die, he told reporters that there was 3 options: A. Die as a respectable figure, B. Die in battle, or C. Die in prison. Harry went for the 4th option, die as the winner of the domestic and international Quidditch Cups. He was buried in Godric's Hollow with Hermione and his parents, and his grave became a sort of shrine for the magical world as witches and wizards paid their respects every year on his birthday and the day of his victory over Voldemort. It wasn't bad for a boy who was leaving home. To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.